Welcome. We'll call the meeting to order. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss the process that we're going to use for the superintendent search. And I'm sure you all remember that fortunately we've hired MTSBA from Helena to help shepherd us through this process. And Bob Vogel is here from Helena to help us tonight. And he's pretty much going to run us through the agenda before us. At the end, we will probably vote on anything that we think needs a vote, but we'll hold that towards the end. There will be public comment also at the end. So I'll turn it over to Bob.
Great. Well, it's good to see everybody again, and I think most of you know me, and I was going to say it's good to be back home again, because you do know that I graduated just a few years ago from Sentinel High School, right over here, so I am pretty close to home, and it really is good to be here. And I guess I did want to say a word before we got into the other things about, it's a little awkward for me because I've enjoyed the years that I've had to be around Dr. Clark. You know, Jim's been a great person to be around, and I know for you guys as well. And it makes it a little tough to be talking about this with him here, to be excited, which I am excited for you and to be working with you, but I didn't want that to come off in a bad way to Jim.
You want me to leave now while I was out there?
No, I just wanted to make sure that you guys, and I'm sure that you will, in fact, honor and recognize the accomplishments that you've all been through under his leadership. So I did want to say that before we got started. And I think I said this to you 5 years ago. I'm pretty sure I did anyway. But, you know, my belief is, and some of you maybe suffered through my presentations on my Big Six. I don't know if you know what that is or what you're talking about. But yeah, I have. It's now actually up to my Big Eight. But if you remember, for those of you that have been through it, the very first item on that is talks about the board superintendent relationship, and it's the only one that I've prioritized to the point where it is, in my mind, the most important thing that a board does, because all the other items have something to do with that relationship. So, you know, what you're into here is, in fact, I think one of the, if not the most important thing that any board takes on. So I just appreciate being part of that effort. And let me sort of break away from the summary of the process and just say to you that maybe the key points of the process in my mind for you as trustees, I think I have it narrowed down to 3. One of them is listening to staff, students, and the community in terms of what they're looking for along with you. The second one is the screening process, and the third one would be the interviews and the selection process itself. So those are sort of the key events that I think the board members need to think about, that you're going to need to be involved in. You know, we'll try as best we can to take any of the other sort of administrative type stuff away from you so that you don't get bothered with day-to-day activities and all of that sort of thing. But you'll see on the agenda, I think, I'm sort of working from my own here, but I think it's the same as what you have. I'm going to go through this real quickly just to give you a sense of what's all entailed in the process. I'm sure I've left some little things out of here, but obviously I think the very first thing is, or one of the first things to do is advertise the position. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to happen before you get to that point. You know, you have to address community and staff involvement. What role do you want them to play? How does that work? What does it look like? The gathering of applications, that's one of the reasons that you have us, is to do that for you. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Screening and selection of finalists, interviews, and I put a few things on my sheet. I think they're on yours as well. Interviews, they aren't just bringing people in for an hour and doing an interview and then sending them on their way. There's a lot more to it for those of you that haven't been through this before. Jim probably suffered through it or did experience it here, but you know, and we can talk more about this down the road, but the interview process is a critically important piece of this whole thing. It basically is a day-long and if not a day and a half experience of touring the district, meeting different staff groups, meeting the board in different settings, and in fact having a formal interview. So there is a formal interview in there, but it's only a piece of that whole interview day or days that are going to take place. Background checks, it's something that you won't see much of until you're on the receiving end of them, but that's something that I'll be deeply involved in terms of looking at the finalists and their background and be doing some additional checking on them. The selection, obviously, and this one I made a note that it may include site visits. That's something sort of to be determined. It just depends on how the process goes, who the people are involved and all of that sort of thing.
Site visit meaning to where they've been?
Yeah,
Okay.
and it can be a site visit or it could be site visits. I've been through both, where you may have one candidate and you're pretty certain that's the person you want, but you really want to sort of do more due diligence and be very certain. And what could happen is you could send, a trustee or two and maybe an administrator out to Honolulu to visit their home district and, wherever they happen to be from. And I'm sure that we'd have a heck of a time trying to pare it down, but if that was the case. But, it may be Bismarck or something like that. And then it's a trick to try to get somebody convinced to go on it. But you go and do some additional interviews and some looking at their home. And, if you really get a good feeling about them. The other instance could be if there's two finalists and you just can't decide between the two and you just need a little bit more to sort of make everybody comfortable and figure it out, then site visits could be possible to more than one location and you could try to get that additional depth of understanding of the candidates. But again, it's something to be determined because, like I said, I've been through every scenario. I don't believe we did it with Jim, although we did some additional checking and some additional interviewing and talking to some different people. I think I talked to Jim and I think some others did about, some additional people to talk to down there. But I've also seen it where somebody will come in and knock your socks off and you just say, we don't, we like what we see and that's all that we need. So that one will be determined later.
One thing that we talked about as a board, and I don't think we talked about it when Jim and Jen and I met with you before, but the board has talked about having the spouse come when we're down to the final one or two.
It's a very good idea, very common anymore. In fact, if you wouldn't have raised it, I would have probably brought it up and asked the question anyway. Because when we do bring people in, like I said, it's a full day, if not a day and a half experience. And my belief is you want to have, it's a package deal, at least in most relationships that you see. They want to come to town and see what they're getting into and, what's going on, so.
When they come to town, though, they need to, I just want to thank Jim for coming to see me Lake a lot. And so that means a lot to my people. And so whoever we hire, I want them to understand that Sealy Lake is part of the package.
Oh, absolutely. And we need to do that, yeah. It's a good point.
And I just want to thank Jim again and my people. Just think that's awesome. My people. My people love that.
They're the Duprees, aren't they?
My people love that.
Thank you, Debbie.
And I just wanted to add too, what Tony was saying is not only do we need to have the spouses come, but we need to pay the bill. We need to put the bill for them to come too. That's very important to me.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have them come along at their own expense. That should be
I
part
think
of our...
I've shared this with some people, but last year we were actually in Great Falls, and it literally got down to we needed to pick them up at the airport and not go down 10th Avenue South when they came into town. They didn't want want them to have their first impression of Great Falls going down 10th Avenue South. So we had to make sure to have a route to get them to the hotel that was not down that way. Yeah, so that's the sort of detail that we'll look at. But
We avoid West Broadway.
yeah, I think North Reserve at certain times of the day and Broadway probably.
That's life by flight.
We'll try to think of those little things along the way just to make sure. And actually, the traffic pattern comes into play a bit, in all seriousness,
It does.
during the tour of the district. You know, obviously, you know, and this will be a recommendation of mine, it's certainly not what you have to do, but I think Jim probably appreciated it when he was here, is we want to get them out and at least view a portion of the district, get them into at least an elementary building, probably middle school and high school. The difficulty here is the same as in any large district, is you can't probably physically get them into 3 high schools, an alternative school, middle schools, and all of, how many elementary schools do you have? 9. It just physically isn't possible unless you really want to do it and keep them here for 3 or 4 days. But, so we need to decide that and sort of plan a route and get a representative sample, but that's all stuff that we'll think about down the road. Those are good suggestions, so hang on to those, because I'll, like I said, if you don't bring them up, I probably will anyway, and we'll be talking about those at some point. The contract itself, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but, you know, we will in fact sort of do a preliminary negotiation of that contract with the individual, try to come to terms with them. You'll see this in the timeline as we talk about it. Hopefully we'll have it ready shortly after you've made the offer to the individual for the board to then ratify the contract. So, and we'll go through that with you so that you understand all the provisions of the contract. That sort of in a nutshell is the timeline, or is the process. The timeline itself, and I don't know that I need to read these to you. Actually, I have calendars if anybody wants. Do you like to have an actual calendar to write on? If anybody else wants one of these.
Did you take off the birthdays?
We did, actually, and I think Lisa left M-Cell on there in Great Falls, but other than that. But you'll see some of the dates and the significant dates that are here.
Talking about our birthdays or like the president's birthday?
Well, what they're talking about is when I originally did this. When I originally did this, I got a calendar from Lisa and I didn't recognize it until I got here. But she had some of her family's birthdays on it, her mother's court date and all sorts of things. I'm not sure what that was about.
No, it was worse. Mom's hearing.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah.
I was really worried about that.
Maybe it's with an audiologist.
What I'd like you to do, though, is to look at those calendars.
And this may not really be germane to our discussion at this point of interviewing and announcement of selections, but we may be having difficult negotiations this year, and how does that fit in? Do we want, is that going to cause any problems, or have we thought about that?
I haven't thought about it specifically, but it's probably something we should think about a bit in terms of the timeline. It's not something you can avoid, though. I mean, it's the reality that you're facing, so.
Well, that's why we asked for early everything.
Yeah. But let's sort of keep that in mind as we talk about this, because I don't know that that'd weigh into this or not. You know, I don't know if there's any particular advantage to one way or the other to have this done. I mean, the new person doesn't start till July 1. I mean, that's the contract year, so the hiring process, while it hopefully will be concluded sometime in early March, really doesn't bring somebody new into the picture until July 1st. We can talk more about that, yeah. But what I want you to look at when you look at these dates, you'll see, you know, that what we're sort of up to here is the questionnaire, and we're going to talk about it more extensively in a minute. We want to get out as quickly as possible, make it available. You know, I guess I'm sort of making some assumptions here. That's if you agree that that's the thing to do and that this questionnaire is the way to go, announce the position November 15th. The position would close on February 1st, and I actually bumped that back from January, there are 31 days in January. Because February 1st happens to fall on a Friday, you'll notice that on your calendar. Board screening, we somewhat arbitrarily did this, but we set February 11th for the screening. We do need a little bit of time between the closing and the actual screening to get all the applications all finalized. We put a matrix together for you, that sort of thing.
February, what did you say?
February 11th.
It's a Monday night, the night
It's a
before
Monday night.
our monthly meeting is the next night.
Yeah, so, and that's one thing to consider, that's 2 nights in a row, but that's a pretty important night. I wish I could tell you exactly how long it's gonna take, but, my guess is gonna be probably at least a 4-hour block of your time. Depending on how things work out and the number of applicants. But it's gonna take review of all of the applications, and then I'll facilitate a process where we'll go through and talk about what you've seen in those applications and, share whatever information I can with you and start into a narrowing process to get them down to finalists.
Just out of curiosity, what was the average, or what was the number of applicants they got last time they opened the position here in Missoula? Do you remember? Are we talking 5 or are we talking 25?
No, we weren't.
My recollection was probably 12 to 15.
Yeah, I was thinking 15.
I think 15, maybe it
Some
was
of
a
them were
few
obviously
greater.
not good.
I will tell you, Great Falls last year had 12. My experience has been that it's been on sort of a steep decline in the last number of years. In fact, I've got an article here that talks a little bit about that, but when I first started doing these, and actually when I was on the Helena board and we had an opening, I'm going to say that we probably typically saw, for a district as attractive as Missoula, we'd probably see 35, maybe 40 applications. Now we're down to the point, and then up to a few years back, we were probably in the 20s in terms of numbers of applicants in the applicant pool. Now, typically, we're down somewhere between 15 and 20. Like I said, Great Falls last year was 12.
So on this February, this Monday night, I'm not familiar with the process. We all come in and we just spend 4 hours just sitting here just looking at these things? Is that what you're saying?
Sort of.
He wants you to read them too.
Yeah. What we'll have is, we'll have it well organized. It's,
Okay.
for those of you that have been through it before, I think it works pretty well. I mean, we tend to organize them pretty well, so that they'll have a checklist with all of your names on the front of the folder that each of them's in, so that after you've gotten through and review it, you can make notes or whatever you want to and things you've noticed in it. You can check it off and then go through another one. So let's say you have 12 of them to go through. I can probably go through one in 3 or 4 minutes, but
Yeah.
it'll take, 5 to 10 minutes probably for each of you to go through each one of them. So 2 hours is just that.
Okay.
I mean, I do a lot of talking during that time, so I probably interrupt you more than you'd like me to sometimes, but I try to point out things to look at, things
Okay.
to make particular note of, that
And
sort
then-
of thing.
I'm sorry, Joe, I just had one other question. As far as open meetings go, in this process, can the public come to that, and can they sit around and look at these applications too? That part of this is not open for,
No, everything in the
Okay.
process is open with 2 exceptions. One exception would be the screening process, and
Okay.
that's where these
because they have a right
applications
to
are.
privacy for their applications,
Yeah,
correct?
because they have a lot of things like references and social security numbers
Right,
and
okay.
things like that that are in those. So you go through those, get them screened down, like I said, obviously name the finalists and provide as much information as possible. Obviously
Right.
not social security numbers or anything,
Okay.
but background, sort of what I call resume information on all the finalists to everyone. And then the second time that you'd have an executive session would be following the final interview. When you go in to deliberate, I'll give you the background checks on the individuals after the last interview, when you're sort of in your time for deliberation. We're going to talk more about this down the road, and how this all looks. But that's the only time where you go in and in fact, have some deliberations in closed session, but otherwise, everything's done.
But the interviews
Interviews are
open to the public. Would
Yeah.
that be televised?
It's up to them.
Yeah, okay.
You know,
Right, that's it.
likely would, and I mean, that's an interesting scenario. I think I probably mentioned this once before, but once upon a time in Billings, they did, they televised everything over there too, and I actually talked to one of the candidates at a time, probably maybe 10 years ago, and he said he got into his hotel room, turned on the TV, and was going through the channels, and they were interviewing one of his, and I said, "So did you watch it?" And he said, "Well, I got the job." So I don't know.
That's a cryptic answer.
Yeah, he didn't really come out and tell me, but I mean, that's sort of an issue that's sort of interesting that we'll have to deal with down the road, but, yeah.
Why are we doing background checks so late in the game? Wouldn't we want to do background checks on before we even start looking through their material ourselves? Because if there is something in there that's significant, it may disqualify somebody. So to wait until we're down to the last few to do a background check to find that out, background checks aren't that expensive. Well, I don't know what kind you're doing, I guess.
Well, yeah, and let me explain them, because with the kind we do are fairly time-consuming and expensive both, but a fingerprint background check is something different. That's a $32 item that is pretty simple and straightforward that's done as well, but the kind of background checks that we're doing take considerable amount of time, and although I suppose we can consider them now that we're down to 12 and 15 candidates, but when we had 30 people that we had, it would just be overwhelming to try to undertake doing it. I'm not going to say I'm going to know everybody in the pool, but we're going to have a pretty good idea. You'll see in the application materials, you're going to get a pretty good amount of background on people. There's some questions in there about their background and, whether they've been arrested or whether they've had, there's different things that will give you some clues to their background anyway. And it goes in stages. I mean, you're going to have enough information, I believe, to be able to make a decision to narrow. It's a narrowing process, and you get down to that point. I don't know that in all of the years I've done this and all of the superintendent searches I've been involved with, that I've ever gotten to a point where there's been something that would disqualify a candidate or be that big of red flag when it came right down to the final tally. Now, I will say that there's probably a time when the background may have led people to say, it was sort of even between these two individuals, and now that we've sort of heard this, I think we know where we're going. But I haven't really had it come about that it disqualifies somebody entirely. We'll filter them out along the way, I think, before that.
I think
Joe's
turn.
One of the things you talked about in this, the screening thing and the monitors, since I'm new to this, will we have printed material available to us, or that night with our first blush of these things? I mean, is that presented to us like in packets or something to review ahead of time, or the possibility of, again?
Good question, and what we did last time, Joe, is we actually did make them available, and I'm trying to remember for sure, but we've done it a number of times where we basically we only do one set. We don't have multiple copies of these. They're floating all over the place. I think there's some danger in that, but we will or can make them available to people individually. What we did last time is I think we had it up in Jim's office.
We had in the 6th Street building, that little room across from where Carol sits, that we had a lock put on that door, so we had a place to keep them secure, and trustees could come in. Actually, it was a couple days ahead of time.
It was a couple days worth.
And, any time in the day that fit anyone's schedule, and you can just get the key from Carol or Trudy and then go in the room, and they're in a box, and there's one copy, and multiple trustees can be in there, and you can look at them at your leisure. And then when you come to the Monday night meeting on the 11th, then hopefully we've all had a chance to look at them ahead of time.
Yeah, because people
If
have different
that
rates of
works.
absorption.
Well, and that potentially can, I just a word of caution about that. I mean, ideally, that could work very well, and it has at times where if every board member spends a few hours going through them prior to the time we go into screening, it can be a much shorter session that evening. But the caution I'd have for you is that it only takes a couple of trustees that didn't get the time in those days preceding that meeting, that you still have to allow them the opportunity to go through them all. So that's the caveat I have for you, is that it could make it much shorter, and maybe a better chance to maybe review them a second time that evening than go through and make sure to kind of refresh your memory more than just getting hit with them for the first time. But all of you are involved equally in this, so that's the only issue there. But we can make that work.
Okay, describe to me the process where we can involve parents and staff. Where can they be involved?
Let me jump to that. A couple of things, and the very first thing, and maybe we should just jump to that right now, is the questionnaire itself. Is that my belief is over time is that, and that's one of the reasons we've developed these questionnaires. You did utilize them the last time, if you'll remember that, here in Missoula, and this questionnaire, hopefully everybody's had a chance to at least glance at it, is substantially similar to the one that you used the last time, which I think is a good thing for a number of reasons, but it's sort of the first opportunity for people to start to weigh in. One of the other things I like about a questionnaire, because I think this is not only a process where you're trying to solicit input into the process and into the type of individual you want, but you're trying to educate people as to what is this person about that's a superintendent. I know that we went through this 5 years ago, and every district I've ever worked with, there's a number of people in the community. You guys know, you've sat on the board, you know what Jim does and what his position is, but I mean, frankly, I can remember back to when I first got on the board in Helena in the early 90s, I didn't really have a good idea of who the superintendent was or what their role was in the district. That's part of this process in my mind, is not only getting comment from the public, but educating them a little bit more on who this person is and why it's an important position. But that's the start of it, Jim, is the questionnaire. Throughout the process, every time you have a meeting, certainly you're going to have people involved. Then it's part of the process that we want to make sure to have, well, let me make sure to cover the other part, because we're actually going to have some facilitated meetings with groups of students and staff to go in and very pointedly talk to them, see if they have questions, try to get them, again, back focused on the questionnaire, but pick up any other comments they might have about the process, about the individuals we're looking for, about, what the board's doing in this case, whatever. And you'll notice on here, the very last thing is we can also take additional comments. I put my email address out there, which hopefully I won't regret that, but it's, I get a lot of email already, but I guess the key point here is we want to try to solicit as much input from the public as we possibly can. And I think we want to try to find every method we can of going about that. And part of that is the questionnaire itself, part of it's the facilitated sessions with the staff and students. You're going to talk a little bit later, I think, you and Tony, about your efforts already, that you've done some interview work with selected administrators, and we're going to try to continue that a bit. Then a little bit later on in the process, certainly you're going to bring when you bring the finalists in, you're going to want to have meetings set up with all of the staff groups. We'll hopefully try to do a community reception of some sort so that the community can come in and meet all of the candidates. We'll have at least some written opportunity for people to make comments on all of the candidates, whether it's observations they've had during the course of their day and their tour, or after their interviews, or whatever the case may be. They'll be able to give comments and share those with the board. And then obviously, even down to the last, after the interviews are over, the public has a right to comment on individuals even then. But when it comes right down to it, the decision on who you select as your new superintendent rests with the board. You know, and we need to be clear about that with people. That's just the way it is. I mean, that's the way it's written in statute, and that's your responsibility. That's why you get the big salary, is to make that important decision. You know,
The reason why I asked is because in one of the last articles in the newspaper, the MEA stated that they were looking for a process where they were involved in the interview process. And is there a way in which that could be accommodated or not?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think we want to make every effort, and every time I've ever done one of these processes, I've tried to make sure that we have all staff groups and community members involved to every extent possible throughout the interview process.
Well, it's different asking people, well, what kind of superintendent you want. Mm-hmm. That's one thing, but after the candidates are here, is there going to be a time in which the parent groups or any of those groups can actually have their time set up their own process to talk to them, other than just a reception like where you go from coffee to tea and you get to talk to somebody for a minute?
Well, we'll try to identify all of at least the staff groups. Certainly MEA. I mean, usually what you go through is certified and classified staff and all of those. If there is, I mean, if there's a PTO or PTA, I'm not certain.
It's not one council.
Okay. If you have any identifiable groups, we can certainly try to find a way to make that happen and allow them to get together. But one of the things you try to do with the community reception is allow anyone and everyone, whatever group they're with, is to come in and be able to see all of the candidates in the same setting. So, plus they can come into the interviews themselves and compare them directly.
I just wanted to make sure that as we discuss this process, that there will in fact be an opportunity for the different groups to do their own interview, or however we said. It could only be like you get them for 40 minutes or something, and they can talk and they go from one to the other. Last time I remember, each of the groups actually gave a recommendation, of which we didn't follow any of them, I don't think. Which I tell Dr. Clark that all the time.
I think, Jim, what they actually said, and it bothered me a little bit, is that the phraseology was they would like a place at the table. And that inferred to me that they were looking for more than the same ability as classified, certified in the public, that they were looking for a seat. And that's what I kind of understood.
You could interpret it that way, I suppose. I don't know.
Well, see, I think that's the trick. I mean, in any of these instances, the key is, I think, this is up to the board. This is my recommendation, though, is I think you should welcome as much involvement and as extensive involvement in the process as you can possibly get from people. But when it comes right down to it, it gets not only unwieldy, but almost downright illegal to have somebody involved in the process of making the decision. That's why you've been elected. You're elected officials, and you make the final decision that you have to live with. But certainly, you're going to want to be responsive to your constituents.
They get to live with.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I just, if I may, I just wanted to really underscore what you just said, because I really think sometimes in our willingness and openness to be accommodating to so many people, we overlook the whole process of the way our government is set up, which is why we're elected to this position. We're there to represent people, and yes, people can call us, they can write to us, they can email us, but ultimately, we're in this elected position to represent those people. And to say, well, we're going to include you at the table, they've already been included at the table by going to the ballot box and electing us to these positions. So let's not overlook that.
Well, I was kind of making the same point that Nancy is here too. I mean, we talk about the inclusion of these other groups and stuff, but I imagine it's through the normal avenues of their, should I dare say, influence, or how, if they would like to call it that, on that they would have through the board, is how those recommendations or the effect of their interviews of these candidates will come to us. I mean, to me that, I mean, it seems very good to have avenues to accommodate their input, but I can't, just like you said, Nancy, I don't see those being any different.
They already exist.
Yeah, they're not any different than public comment at our meetings. Again, phone calls, emails to individual board members, other things that they could perhaps lobby for in more of a community-wide way. I can imagine MEA lobbying back to their constituents to therefore lobby to us. But, I mean, I still, again, it seems like the formation is already set, just like Jim and I was maybe going to follow up on the more question on this. I mean, recommendations, where those just came in the same sort of way, those same avenues came with recommendations before when the selection process was going on. And then again, we can take that and put grist into the mill and make our decisions from there.
Let me talk about that for just a minute, because I'll try best I can through the process and through that interview process where, let's say, MEA is at the table and does have some time on their own with the individual candidates individually to be able to talk to them a bit. And certainly they should have then the ability to share what they heard through their ears with the board. We want to make sure to accommodate that. What I'd like to stay away from, if at all possible, is to have them say, we want number 1 and we don't want number 3. And, you know, if it could be more helpful in their responses so that they could point out, here's what we liked about, here are the characteristics and why we liked this candidate, here's why we like this candidate, here's why we like this candidate. We heard a few things that concerned us here, a few more things here, you know, that sort of thing. To me, if I'm a board member, that's helpful to me, to hear that. What I probably don't want to hear necessarily, and it's probably less helpful, is we want this person. And because then the natural question is, why is that? You know, and if there isn't more explanation forthcoming, then it's less than helpful to you who are making the final decision. So anyway, I'm sorry to go on so long about, but my role is to try to solicit, and you'll see from the written form, and we keep perfecting this, but we used one the last time here. You'll see how we try to channel comments from everyone into constructive comments, not just, we like this person, we don't like this person. That just isn't real helpful. At least I don't think it's to you as trustees as you're trying to make your decision.
Well, whatever. As long as we make sure that everybody believes and actually has been included and has that opportunity. If I remember the last time they gave reasons and so forth, it's people's natural inclinations to, if they're included in the interview with, say, the last top 3 or the last top 2 or wherever, the top ones, you know, they're going to come in and say, well, this one's better because of this and this. We prefer this one. Well, I don't find that not helpful. I find it. I do find it helpful, but they'll give their reasons. They're not that, but I just want to make sure that we're very clear as we proceed along the way, that we're going to develop a way in which they are going to have input. And we should be clear from the outset that that's going to happen. Don't keep it too nebulous, that that's going to happen so that, that when, as we go along, we won't be picked at because we didn't include it. That's all I'm asking.
And I'll try to get that message out to everyone as well. I mean, I'm more than open to entertaining any kind of other ideas on how to make that happen than what we've already thought of and tried to build into the process. One other, go ahead. One other quick thing about people finding out about backgrounds, and I think somebody asked about background checks. My strong preference is because background checks get into real tricky territory when you start doing them. So, my strong suggestion to board members is don't try to take them on yourselves and start calling people. I mean, if you know somebody that lives in Miles City and that's where one of the candidates is from, the natural inclination is you're going to call your brother or your sister or whoever that lives there and say, what do you know about this person? And that's just human nature, and there's nothing wrong with that in my mind. But what we like to do is keep the background checks on a consistent basis. We don't want to try to have a flood of people calling from Missoula that are all calling Wyoming or Hawaii or wherever the person's at, trying to dig up background on people. I can almost guarantee you that'll happen anyway. Doesn't matter where people are from. I mean, if it's Houston or Denver or wherever, you're going to have people that have relatives there and know people there and are going to start making phone calls and looking at their background. And so you'll get that sort of thing too. Again, I guess I try to keep things in perspective, and you want to try to keep a process so that you're looking at each individual fairly and equally and consistently. Not trying to have people going out digging up dirt or information on a particular person and then coming to you and saying, oh, did you know that this person had this? Well, you'll find that out at some point along the way and certainly factor that in. But anyway, I just want to make you certain that you know that, and it's real. We're realistic enough to know that it will happen. It's just that we like to be able to do thorough background checks and make sure they're done sort of legally, ethically, and straightforwardly. So.
No, I'll send you.
Okay.
Are we going to talk about this questionnaire?
Yeah.
Because I really had a hard time with the very first question. I was wondering if we had a chance to even talk about what we all selected, just to kind of get an idea of what we're thinking. But those first...
The check,
that was difficult to me, very difficult.
So tell me more about that. Why did you find it? Just because it was hard to limit it down to 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all...
There's not one to take out.
Yeah, well, there were a couple that
Yeah.
I thought, I don't really care about that, or he shouldn't really be doing that, or she shouldn't be doing that. But it was very, very difficult.
Yeah. Well, and here's sort of the theory behind it, and let me talk about the questionnaire a little bit, and then, because that's sort of what we want to hear tonight, and see if we can adjust at all. But again, remember that as much as this is trying to get opinions, if you're a person on the street and you're asked, and you get a questionnaire and it's just, what kind of person do you want to see as a superintendent? I may not have a whole lot of response to that. I'll go, well, nice guy, dresses well. I, can't think of much more. Well, what this one was sort of intended to do is start to lay out some of the key things, whether it's working collaboratively with the community, the district budget, educational programming, personnel. I mean, you were absolutely right. Every one of these is important. What we're trying to get a sense of, though, in this questionnaire and this survey is, where is the community as a whole? And I should have brought along the responses from the last time, but I think you'll see it more so on the back end of this than you will now. But if people can start to think about this and say, well, yeah, absolutely, it's important to have somebody that's, can oversee personnel, but I really think the key is, for a superintendent, is to be able to have that strategic direction or be an educational leader. It does force people into making some priority choices. And, we got some the last time that they did. They had probably 5 or 6 of them, Mark. And, that's to be expected, Maybe they just can't follow directions, but on the other hand, they just can't decide. So I understand what you're saying, because I agree with you. Every one of these is important. But what we're trying to get at is, what do you individually think are the key ones? If you had to narrow it down to 3, what are the ones that are the most? Because unless you can find somebody, and maybe Jim can walk on water now that he's been here a while, but unless you can find somebody that can do all of these things equally well, I don't know if there's a person out there like that. But what we're trying to find is, can we come up with an individual that most closely fits the mood and the flavor of the community as a whole? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it was just very difficult for me, and I just felt like, well, gee, I'm picking the wrong ones.
Yeah, no.
And I just like to say, I like to hear.
Well, there's no right answers, that's for sure, but what we're trying to do is, it is as much a question, as much a survey as it is a questionnaire, to try to give you as a board in particular a better sense of what are people thinking out there. Do they want somebody that's really a budget person, and that's where their thinking is at? And that's where the emphasis is, or is it on strategic thinking, on vision, or is it on being an educational leader? Where is it? And it may be different. The advantage I talked about earlier is that we have the results from the last survey. So I think it's going to be even more helpful to you this time around if we use this to compare what was said last time versus this time. Yeah.
Can we maybe add to this over a period of time, however long the superintendent's contract is? Because I can tell you that budget issues are going to be a big thing. So everybody in the community is going to see that, and they're going to go, because it's going to come up at that time of the year. Doesn't it, or am I lost? Because we're going to go through some issues this next year. So those are going to be important. 2 years from now, they may not be the number one issue out there. We're still got the same superintendent. But if this has a significance to, over the next 3 years, what would be the most important things? Because otherwise, we're going to get whatever's on the news that day from the community. The day they pick this thing up, they're going to go, oh, yeah, well, some school teacher just got caught whatever, and this is going to be at the top of their list. So if we can have a longer period of their thought process when they're looking at it.
So are you thinking about doing another survey, a similar
No,
survey
just add
later,
to
or
it.
just keep it going?
Just add to this list where it says what are the 3 most significant things over the next 3 years, 4 years, 2 years, whatever, that the superintendent should focus on.
Oh,
Do you think that wording would eliminate that focus of the time, though?
It couldn't hurt. The majority of the people that will take the time to fill this out are the same ones that are watching the news, I think, and it's gonna be based on what is in the news that day.
At the end of this, you're suggesting to add within the next 2 to 3 years? What do other people think about that?
I was looking just at the top. At the
My
beginning.
big concern, especially with getting community input, is that, and I mean this in all seriousness, I've been a trustee now for over a year, and I still, to be honest with you, I don't really have a firm grasp on what it is that Jim does all day, every day. I know what he does is he's good at it, but it really, until you work, unless I worked alongside Jim, what I think is hard, and I think what's going to be our responsibility, is to educate the community about what superintendents do and what they don't do. I mean, it's our job as trustees to set a budget, to oversee the superintendent, and to do policy and procedure. I mean, so I think it's going to be hard to ask for input from the community unless we do a little prior educating on what is it realistically that we can expect from a superintendent. What kind of, what leadership skills does a good superintendent need to have? Otherwise they'll be pigeonholing their favorite cause or whatever, and that might have nothing to do with the superintendent and what kind of, qualifications they have. Do you understand what I'm saying? I mean, it would be hard for me to go into Wall Street and say, well, what's going to be a good CEO of a company? I don't know, because I don't know what a CEO of a financial company does. And just because school is in the news and school issues are near and dear to everybody's heart doesn't necessarily mean that people really understand what this job entails. And so I think that it would be good, if we want to get, an educated input from people, we need to educate them a little bit.
Well, there's a couple of reactions I have to that. One is, that's in part how this questionnaire was designed, because, you said it before, every one of these, the top section in that first section, probably could or should be checked. But what it also does is, as people read through it, they go, wow, I guess they have to do that. I guess they have to do that. But again, these are the most significant responsibilities. It starts to give people a little bit of a glimpse of what a superintendent does, because you have the list there. It sort of continues on with, in another format, talking about, budget experience, planning and implementation, but in a little bit different way, because you can sort of give a range of an answer. If that's sort of down on your low end, you can certainly do the one, and that's where your numbers will start to show when you get the results of this. You'll start to see, where the key priorities are. But you are, in fact, I think, along the way, educating people to say, wow, I didn't realize they had to do this or this or this. And then you get down into the optional questions. My point before was, if you would ask these questions, if you just came out and started asking what's been working well in the district that a new superintendent should continue, I'm not sure what kind of response you're going to get from a lot of people. There's going to be a few responses, but I'm not sure you're going to get a lot of quality responses there that'll be real helpful to you in figuring things out. But that's sort of why we designed the survey the way we did, is to elicit more input, get some thought into it, but educate as we do it. And keep in mind, the other point I was going to make is that we are going to do sessions with at least staff groups and student groups to try to do exactly what you just said, Nancy, and is go through and try to talk about who is a superintendent, what do they do, what's their role.
I guess that was the thing, is I thought this was just a bit misleading, because to plan and manage the district's budget, that's why we have a budget director, right?
No, he doesn't.
Ultimately you do, but ultimately the superintendent's responsible and is the accountable one for all of that.
Yeah.
Those are all functions. In an organization this large, you're going to have other people that do this. We did add, in fact, the delegation of responsibility in there, because that is a critically important part of it. If any one person tries to take all this stuff on, they would have been long gone before.
That's what I'm saying, there's not enough hours in the day for anybody to do all of these things. So, okay.
The important thing here is, it's the very first question, it tells which group they belong to. And you'll find, and I think Tony and I will attest to you when we talk to you about what our interviews that we did, that every time you talk to one portion, whether it's the elementary principal or a high school principal or an administrator, they see the world according to GARP. How they, from their point of view, is what you see. And each one of these, this is kind of like a big circle, and they'll tell you what it looks like from their point of view. Okay, so if you have, if things perk up and you'll see an employees are saying the same thing as a parent is saying, now the parents are going to have a different point of view. They'll be looking at the issue differently. Then that becomes extremely important as an item if there's a consistency through here. But if there's no consistency, it just each group has their own point of view. It may not be very helpful, but what is helpful is that they've learned more, and that's in itself that's a good reason to do this. But you purposely make it difficult, because if you tell everybody, they'll go through and they'll check everything. Well, what do you learn from that?
Well, I'm glad you raised what you did, Jim, because I should have brought a copy of the completed one from before, because that's exactly how it'll be reported, is that you'll have 4 different categories here for each answer. Is there one in there?
There's one.
Is it in your packet?
It's been in a previous packet.
Okay, so you've seen it, but it'll be laid out. The responses from 5 years ago to the questionnaire, you'll have 4 different numbers for number 1 down below, I want a superintendent who.
Yes.
You won't have just one number that says, the average response was a 5.5. You'll have parents as a group said it was 9, district employees said it was 1, students said it was 5. I mean, you'll get to see, like Jim said, each of those groups and how they responded to it.
That's great.
It'll not only will you do that, and thanks, Jim, for handing this to me, you'll see that it breaks it out in each of the categories and then provides you an overall average. So you'll be able to pick out, and we starred the ones obviously that are the highest responses, so you'll be able to see overall as a total, and you'll be able to see each individual group. I mean, it's going to take to get to the back end of it before you really see the benefit of it, is my point here. But I think there will be some benefit in it because you're going to get the flavor of what people are doing here.
Maybe working.
But, I'm going to go back because you were suggesting to maybe put some language at the top, not just on that first one, because I was sort of thinking you were saying for that first one, the most significant responsibilities within the next few years, but you're saying at the top of the questionnaire itself, say, think about this in the terms of
Long term, instead of just what's on their mind that particular day. I think it's a good idea, but I don't know. You've done this longer than I have. I just thought it would be a good suggestion to add something that would put the person in the frame of mind of not the trouble that you're seeing in the news today, but over the next few years, what's important for the superintendent to do. Because Jim doesn't solve all these problems in 1 year or 2 days anyway. These are issues that are ongoing.
what about in that very first sentence where it says this survey's design is to add on to that and say, or put us another sentence and say, please recognize that we're interested in the long term over the next 3 to 5 years.
How long is the contract?
3 years usually.
The longest you can go in Montana is 3 years.
And was yours every 3 years or every year?
Mine, the first time I was here, when I first came was 2 years, then after that it was offered 3 years.
But isn't that also, wasn't that the whole point of us doing our strategic plan? I mean, we did this whole strategic plan and got all this input from the community, because that's going to be the superintendent's, one of his or her responsibilities, is to pick up and go with that strategic plan, so.
That's why I didn't pick it.
And so therefore,
I'm here.
and I think
Yeah,
that.
I mean,
that kind
because
of adds-
you've sort of been there, done that. So
Yeah.
for your perspective, but if there's been somebody out there that thinks, well, I want to make sure we continue along those same lines and think strategically and make sure to plan, that's really critically important. You'll see that come out in some people.
Or redo what we thought.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's what I'm
You know,
afraid we're
I'm
gonna
thinking
end
about
up
what
doing, is
Nancy
redoing
just
the
said
whole thing.
is good validation for Rick's suggestion. I think anything that we do here that helps focus people is helpful. There are so many words on this page that it's just going to be too much to take in for a lot of people. And if we just have a little trigger at the top that just says, think about the next 3 years and what you'd like to see in this
Right.
leadership position.
Right.
Okay?
That's a simple.
Simple.
Yeah,
That would
keep it
help me go, okay, I'm going there.
Yeah.
You
Say
know?
that again to me now. Think about the next
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Think
Does that
about
work
what
for
would you
people?
like this leader to do in our
Yes.
community over the next 3 years.
Yes. And please be sure to refer to the strategic plan if you want to know anything. We worked really hard on that.
That's right. It's
very black and white. And it's on the website.
Can I add or add to this, and maybe with your input, what's the average tenure for a superintendent? So instead of 3 years, what's the average? Is it 5 years? Is it 2 years? Is it?
I just heard it the other day, and now I can't remember.
I
It's
would-
Six, isn't it?
3.68 or so, it's like a weird number, but it's between 3 and 4 years in Montana.
So do we want to say 3 to 4, or just 3, just pick one?
That's good enough for
Three.
beginning,
Say
you know. I mean, I think that one of the requirements of this contract is that somebody stays 10 years, don't you guys?
You know, I think it. I don't know. 3 years, 5 years, and then the point is that you want them to look out into the
You want them to
future,
look-
ways. You don't want them just to look at today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bob, you may, again, we might be making too much of this because it's only part of the survey that's going to give us information to make that ultimate decision. Have you guys, in the past, when you're planning this, thought about numbering these on a scale? Because when you make 3 of them, you eliminate all the others. And you could have a very popular number 4 across a lot of groups. You know, if I had to rank these, ones to whatever, you know, because, but again, maybe we're trying to involve too much minutia in just this survey thing, and I really
But
don't.
see, there's a
I know what
double
you're
check
saying.
here. Look at the bottom one. I want a superintendent too, and then you rank there.
Yeah.
And so you look at that and compare it to what it was up there, and you see if they're really doing the same thing. It's just.
And Joe, we actually did do that a couple of times that I can recall, and we got a lot of comments from people saying, wow, I mean, I couldn't decide, I mean, because we had a lot of people, you could see where they cross it off, and then they put 2, and then they cross it off, and no, that's 3.
9 and 8 and 7.
Yeah, it really
Maybe
gets,
they need to go back to school.
it really gets tough if you do that. I understand it, and we did try that, I mean, we tried it the other way and tried to say, you know, list your top most significant, you know, do 1, 2, 3. Oh, people are like, oh, this is impossible, I can't, I mean, they have a hard enough time, like you said, picking out their top 3 and just checking them, but if you say number them, they're like,
And you pick out the numbers from the questions below.
Yeah, it'll work.
I'm anxious to see what people write in as other.
well, and just a word about, I mean, the design of it again is, if you think about yourself and what do you respond best to, some people actually like this where they have a list to choose from and they can check, because it's right there, it gives them some ideas. Like I said, it's not a blank question, whether you say, describe, you know, what your favorite scene in Montana is, it's,
And it's part of public
here's the
education
choice.
that you talked about earlier. We
Yeah.
are educating the public by giving them this.
And others like to go through the thing below where you have numbers and you can sort of rank them on a scale. And then there are others, and there's not as many of these folks out there, but there are people that like to write. And they'll put, you know, their comments in the optional questions. But what you're trying to do in this thing is to elicit comments and helpful thoughts from people, no matter which way they like to do it. Because some people will like this top part and then they struggle with the rest of it, or vice
There's
versa.
3 ways to answer it.
Yeah. So you try to give them a little bit of every approach. But I think we can incorporate, it's a good idea that we add that in and get the focus of it sort of out a ways, not just on the near term.
Bob, I got one more thing for you. You guys can just tell me I'm crazy. But when I read through this, and I saw at the bottom it says additional comments to be emailed to Bob Vogel, MTSBA. Most people won't know what MTSBA is, and they're going to want to know why the school district isn't doing this. Why someone else? And it takes some of the it questions as to whether this is an actual survey to get a superintendent, or whether somebody is just trying to find out information from people. It doesn't say Missoula County School District at the bottom of this stuff. It doesn't say that this is our survey. It can say Bob Vogel for the Missoula County School District, or, I think we should have our name on this thing, instead of they might think it's Missoula something.
Carol's probably gonna throw something at me, but I'm sort of gonna look her direction and see, I mean, is it possible to put Carol's email address on this?
Sure.
Can we do that? And
Yeah, you said that right fast.
yeah, you volunteered that pretty fast here. I was sort of looking Carol's direction and seeing if she freaked about it, but I understand your point. I guess logistically, the only reason we did it that way was we're going to try to compile this for you. But I agree that we could have Carol gather them and do the same thing, and it doesn't lend a confusion to the matter. So we can certainly do it that way.
I don't think that's necessary.
I don't think so either.
I think having it go into Montana School Board is fine, but I do agree that we should have our school district's inputter here somewhere. And you simply put it in the top part. Yeah, just say,
Survey.
pardon?
Just our letterhead.
Yeah, or something that shows that this is from us.
And let's talk about that for a minute. As soon as you said letterhead, I kind of got off track here for a minute, because one of the things we talked about is this is going to be an online survey to the largest extent we can possibly do it. That's sort of what direction we wanted to go, and I guess I want to get reactions from people on that as well. Having said we're going to try to focus on and promote online responses, we're also going to allow people to either get on a computer in a school, at a library, or whatever, and be able to do the questionnaire there, because we know that not everybody has a computer at home and all that. But I guess I would need to hear and make sure people are comfortable. That's sort of where our focus is going to be, because we're thinking we can get, if the last time was any indication, we got huge response here in Missoula. Probably one of the best we've had from any district that I've worked with, and much of it was online. And so I think that works pretty well, but we don't want to discount the ability of people to do a paper survey if that's what they're more comfortable with either.
I would just, at the very beginning, just say this is authorized by the Missoula County Public Schools Board of Trustees, and then
And have them available. Say what MTSBA is. What the
Just have them available at the schools, at the office.
yeah, they're going to do that too.
Yeah,
We are going to do that.
but, I mean, to me, that's, yeah.
Okay.
And then I don't know, I think it would be nice to just put on here that the Missoula County Public Schools has hired the Montana School Boards Association to help us in this. I mean, I don't really know that Carol wants to do that, because I think all of that information needs to be, not that she wants to or doesn't want to, but all of that should be funneled to you. I mean, isn't that why we're paying the big bucks for you?
Yeah.
I mean, really and truly, and I'd hate for this information to kind of go to us and
She
go to
doesn't
her
have
and
to
go
forward it on
to
you
you.
anyway. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, oh,
I
see
think
what
we
you're
can
saying.
find some appropriate
Okay.
language to put in to identify it clearly. I mean,
That's-
in fact, I'm
You could do
Try
that
to
right on
think.
Survey Monkey, just say at the very beginning, who's authorized this, and just go
There you
through
go.
it.
Yeah.
Just
Also think
so our
one of the
inputter is on.
benefits
I get what you're
of
saying.
having the responses go
people
to
send
the
it to Carol. She
MTSBA.
doesn't touch it.
Because
She just-
sometimes, at least in the
Well,
past,
no,
there's some
it can go to
suspicion
him, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm
about
saying.
On
the
survey,
neutrality
yes, it
of,
says this is
a
from,
school district
this is
employee
Missoula County
compiling
Public Schools survey.
input from the public. And this way, it's very neutral. And I think that's a bonus in our community.
Yeah, it's the neutrality of it not
Is
coming.
that all right with folks?
Yeah, that's
Oh, yeah.
what I was thinking, I just not
Yeah.
smart enough to explain it as well as I do.
I think it's a good point, Rick, because a lot of people
Yeah, I
don't
do
know
too.
what MTSBA is.
When I mentioned letterhead, I
No, and I agree.
inclusive, the electronic,
Yeah.
but brings us to another part. Where, is this going to be on the MCPS website, or is it going to be, is that the only place? You said it's going to be widespread, is there going to be, are we going to spam everybody and send this to somewhere? Yeah, I mean, do we have email of parents and
No.
saying?
Well, we did talk about getting word out. I mean, advertising in effect by putting it out in the bulletins that go out in each of the schools to say the survey's available online, or if you prefer, you can get it at the school. And, I mean, that part of it, we're going to advertise it as widely as possible.
So
yeah.
it'll be on our website?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
it'll
takes
be,
care of everything. I mean, you're going to our website.
Yeah,
taking
we're gonna-
surveys,
yeah,
so that
everything goes
pretty
to your
much takes care of
website.
everything that we've been talking about.
yeah, that's where it's found at, is on your website. Okay. Well, that's helpful.
Check that one.
And hopefully we'll do.
Yeah, in your signature line,
You and I can watch
it says Bob Vogel, MTSBA, maybe you just say Montana School Board Association.
Yes.
You know, because that is kind of, we know what it means, but no, just spell that out.
Okay.
That probably will solve that.
I guess the thought there was just to try to get people, if they had other comments that didn't fit into one of these categories that they wanted to elaborate on, is we wanted to encourage them to do that.
Be nice too to put what your title is.
Okay.
What is your title?
King.
Supreme Commander.
Well, and that's sort of, I don't know if we wanted, it's
Director of
Governmental Relations, so the trouble is it sort of throws people off, because
Well, just put.
part of my life is spent as a
Head of the
lobbyist.
search process.
I could put
Yeah.
search consultant, yeah.
Search consultant.
That might be the,
Consultant is a good word.
Search
Yeah.
consultant.
Yes.
That tells who you are.
okay, we'll do that.
Superintendent search.
There you go.
You know, I guess just looking back at the timeline, if you have any other thoughts on it, please share them with me. We are going to try to get this thing online and up and running here in fairly short order, because we do want to publicize it as widely as possible. And, you know, we're still, you know, a week, 10 days out from that date when we want to really hit it. So if you have other things, don't be bashful about letting us know.
Why was it that we picked November 15th for the position announcement? I mean, other than, does that involve advertising and in school journals and I'd like to know, is that,
No.
are those costs included in your cost, or is that, those are separate costs, obviously, to the school board, or to the school?
Let's move to that and talk a little bit about it. No, I mean, that was pretty arbitrary. In fact, I think at one point I actually put mid-November, because we did have a discussion about, my thinking was about the 1st of December, but we did talk about what's the harm in putting it out there sooner.
Yeah, early.
And so,
Or even earlier than this.
you know, I sort of agreed with that. I mean, the one thing that you're faced with here through this timing is obviously, first of all, Thanksgiving, and then Christmas, and then New Year's. You've got the holiday period in there. So what our thinking was, I think at the time, is let's go to mid-November and try to get it out there then, just to make sure it gets the most amount of exposure we possibly can get it.
So what do we need to do before November 15th? What do we have to decide that goes in that position announcement?
Well, if we move down to, let me quickly talk about advertisement, and then we're going to go to that, because there's two things tonight that we need to know to go into that advertisement, and I'll talk about those in a second. But I wanted to address what Nancy just said, because yes, we're going to advertise this pretty widely. That's, I guess, as I look at it, another benefit of using us. We have an internal list of a couple hundred people that will send things directly to. People typically look at our website. They look at not just our website, but any school board association around the country. They'll look at that particular state website in order to find positions like this. We'll certainly go through MetNet, and you probably know what that is, and if you don't, certainly Larry Johnson does. I mean, you do a lot of your advertising for teachers and that sort of thing on MetNet. All of that is done sort of automatically through us. I mean, it saves you a considerable amount of money in advertising. The traditional advertising is, in my mind, is sort of out of date, and it's very expensive to go through. And I'm not sure that for a superintendent, it's the right way to go, because you're not reaching your audience very well. A couple other things that we'll probably do and consider. We've gone through some transition in the past 5-6 years with university systems. They've gotten funny on us. So it used to be that we could pretty well send things out and it would go to, there's something called, I just lost it, Monster Track, which would get the announcement out to every college and university across the country. There's now a charge. It's not much, but it's, you know, $300, I'm going to say, that does that, and it gets it into the hands of all the colleges and university, their placement services. It's probably worth doing, and that's something that we'll look at over, the next few weeks and determine whether we do that. But it's going to be advertised pretty widely. I mean, unless you tell me, no, we don't want to advertise nationwide, we just want to focus on Montana or focus regionally. But my suggestion would be, and I think on here, it also mentions AASA. I probably should have thrown Education Week on there, but we've had sort of mixed results with Education Week. AASA, we probably will look at putting an online ad with them as well. It's fairly inexpensive and fairly good to do because it gets pretty widespread.
I guess two things. Do you have any ballpark of what that's going to cost? I mean, are we
The
talking
advertising?
$10,000, $5,000?
We do it all for you, other than,
Oh, you do?
the only two exceptions to that, of all that stuff I just mentioned, is AASA. We don't pay for an ad there unless you want us to. And, and I guess, I don't know how you do. My assumption is that we could kind of check in and see now, do we want to do this or not? Like I said, it's a pretty minor expenditure, but AASA and the Monster Track 2 are the two that we don't automatically do.
But so, for the most part,
Everything else,
these costs are included
that's-
in your fee?
Yeah.
Okay.
How much is the AASA?
AASA to do an online, the last one we did was Great Falls last year, and I'm going to say $300 is what we paid
And
for
about the
it.
same
So we're
for Monster
talking-
Truck.
yeah. Okay.
About the same for Monster
Oh,
Truck.
so under $1,000.
Yeah, it's minimal when it comes to advertising costs, if you've ever looked at advertising costs recently. I mean, to put anything in a paper and things like that, it's pretty outrageous.
And I guess my feeling is I mean, what kind of things are going to be included in that? Is that something that we have to decide, like we want a PhD and we want, blah, blah, blah? And why can't we get this out just ASAP? I mean, I even worry about the middle of November, because you've got Thanksgiving, and then you've got Christmas, and then you've got this position closing the middle of February. And I could
We'll
kind
learn
of,
if they can work under pressure.
and if they're paying attention. I was thinking, well, no, I'm thinking that there's the end of terms there, there's the beginning of school terms. I just think of that as just such an incredibly hectic time.
There's a couple things, and don't let me forget these, because it's a great question, and it sort of, you keep pulling me down on the agenda here, which is good, is that in that ad, we're going to need to have salary range, and we have to talk about a supplemental question. And those are the two things tonight that I want to talk about, because when you put the ad out there, you want to be ready to have the supplemental question, so that if I'm sitting in Denver and I see the ad, and I say, yes, send me an application, or I'm interested in applying, we're ready to go with them being able to fill out and do the application. We don't say, well, gee, we're, in a couple weeks or so, maybe I'll have this ready. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that when it gets advertised, they're ready to apply.
But so there's actually an application that they fill out? I would think that this is something, you send us your
The
resume,
individuals?
please. Yes.
Oh, let me go through that with you, because
Well, at this level of job, I don't think if somebody's sitting down like at Denny's and filling out the application, don't they send you a nice thick
well,
resume?
it's
No disrespect to anybody that works
well,
at
and,
Denny's.
Yeah, shame on.
and thank you for getting us into that, because it's something I would have glossed over and not thought about. But and Jim can probably talk a little bit about this as well. But instead of a resume, if you would have said portfolio, I probably would have said okay. And that might be, and that's certainly something Jim had mentioned, I talked with him about this. That's something we'll certainly encourage, although one of the questions we've gotten, I was going to talk more to Jim about this, is we had people ask us, so what do you consider a portfolio? But here's sort of a thumbnail sketch of the application. We typically have a cover letter, letter of interest basically, an application itself that has things like work history, education background, references listed on it, but it also has some pretty legal stuff about have you ever been convicted of a crime, and I don't remember what they all are. There's 3 or 4 of those that you have to go through and mark. There's some waivers that they have to sign. I mean, it's stuff in there. All of this has been designed, and again, it's another part of dealing with us, is our attorneys have gone through and refined this over time. So it's probably a 6 or 7 page application. It's not a 1-page name, address, that stuff. But beyond that, letters of reference, at least 5 letters of reference or recommendation, a resume, and either a placement file or transcript. And that's where I failed to mention that earlier. When you're going through your screening process and you start saying, look at this, they got a D in calculus, I'm going to probably say, you don't probably need to look at that level of detail when you're going through these. But we do get transcripts and or a placement file from the college or university. So I'm probably missing something.
This is very interesting, because I had the pleasure
Oh, and the
of looking at-
response to the supplemental question, or if you choose to have one. So
I had the pleasure
it's
of
a
looking at
packet
Jim's
of information.
portfolio. And I mean, can you tell us how long did that take you to put that together? And is that something that somebody at your level of your profession, is that something that you're consistently working on, or?
Well, in my case, it came out of you talk about how many years, it was 25 years, because all of my experience led up to that portfolio.
Right.
But what I tried to do was to look at various areas of leadership and then give you examples of my past work products, and then how I would apply that here.
Right.
And so that's, when I did a portfolio, it was based on the 8 different areas of leadership that I chose, and they fit in with what you were looking for. And then I gave you, these are examples of what I've done, one-shot, one-liners, and then these were examples, you could see what I did, and then this is how I applied in Missoula.
How long did that take you, though?
Well, it takes lots of hours to do.
It's good, 2 or 3 months?
Yeah, it's easily a 2 or 3 month process, unless you've kept it up.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So I guess my concern is I would hate for us to maybe, lose somebody because suddenly they felt very pressured and they're just like, I just don't have time to get this together, but.
Well, let me say, and I think Jim did say this, that typically people in the profession keep up a portfolio. It's not something that they say, gee,
Over the weekend.
Missoula's open, I'm going to put together a portfolio. That it's something they've thought about and put together or kept up over a period of time. So it's not going to be like, I have to start from square one.
Right.
But they also, in this case, have the ability, if they don't have a portfolio together started, that they could do the traditional application process. Now, I like a portfolio for a lot of reasons. I think it gives you a pretty good feel and understanding, and you will typically see, these are what I talked about, that list that I went through, those are sort of the minimum things, and you'll see a lot of people that will put in, their philosophy of education, their, different things that are typically in a portfolio, they'll put them in the application anyway. So you're going to get more than just the minimal amount of material. That's why it's not like when you sit down for going through the screening that you're going to be able to just look at 3 or 4 pages worth of stuff and be done. It's pretty extensive stuff.
I'm just saying, even opening on October 15th, November, that's, December, January, that's 10 weeks.
Here's the other part of the rationale behind that real quickly, and typically when you put the ad out there, you could say, the position's open, here's the salary range, here's the ending date that you have to have the application in by, all of those things. Typically also what ads say is Missoula County Public Schools, the best place on earth is looking for educational leader that can, and give a little bit of what you're looking for. And sort of what our theory was and what we talked about a little bit is, we're not sure we want to put that out there yet because we don't know that. That's part of what the questionnaire is going to give us. So we needed some time to put that ad together because we're not sure what the emphasis is going to be on. I mean, we can come up with a couple of things, but it'd be nicer to have at least some sense from the community and from the staff and from the board about what is it you're really looking for, to put that in the ad itself. Does that make sense to you? That's why,
guess, I
that's
feel-
why there's a little bit of the delay. I mean, we could certainly try to move that up as much as possible, and I'm not sure that it would distract too much from the ad. Frankly, people are going to investigate you, they're going to look at your website and strategic plan and all of that stuff anyway, but
There's also that brochure that Jim is working on about Missoula, the last down.
That's right.
And I don't want to keep jumping around the agenda, but
No,
that
that's
is
all right.
another piece that isn't quite ready yet, that we want to be able to send out.
I'm so sorry, I have to go to a birthday party
okay.
for my child.
Do we have a due date on the questionnaire? It's on.
We
Nancy,
will have, and it's not, it's a good point, because I don't know
That is-
if we
that's a
have
good
it on
point.
there or not.
Nancy, before you go,
Yes.
is just to confirm, are you okay with March 3 and 4 for interview dates?
Absolutely.
You would be available? Okay,
Yes.
that's a Monday,
It's not the
Tuesday?
middle of spring break, is it?
No.
No, it's a Monday, Tuesday.
Not having spring break anymore.
And you're okay with using this questionnaire?
Yes.
Okay.
I
And,
hand mine, and I filled mine out.
yeah, no, oh, no, that,
You don't want my
also,
Everybody else.
You gotta do it online.
Nancy, a couple other things. I don't want to put you on the spot, but supplemental question, not
Yes.
to write it tonight, but do you think we should have one to see a writing sample and get more philosophically
Absolutely.
from them?
Absolutely.
Okay, and salary range? What, do you have a preference?
Salary range,
Or a salary?
25,000, what we're giving.
125? Okay.
No, not more than that.
Okay.
If you want a range, 23 to 25.
Okay, was there anything else that we need? Oh, I'm sorry. Is this for Nancy?
Would you like us to
You can take one.
think about a supplemental question and then
No.
brainstorm it? Okay.
We're just want, actually, I think we might want to think about topics for, have the board,
And I guess before, if, Kelly, are you?
Yes.
I'm going to give you
Oh, Scott.
one of these handouts. It's sort of the next topic when we start talking about salary, because they did ask me to give you a salary recommendation, or salary range recommendation, so I want to give you some of the background material.
Okay, well,
I'm
wasn't
gonna
that on the
share.
back of our, I think they gave that to us. Oh,
Just a little
great.
bit. Do you want
Okay.
those back?
It's a little bit different.
Thank you.
and
on
Kelly,
this-
in the same
I
question.
agree with everything she said on the salary thing. I mean, I just want us to be comparable to everyone else in the state, and I don't think I'm ready to pay
Okay.
someone 125, but,
Okay. And March 3 and 4 work for you? You'd be able to attend
I think so.
those nights? Okay.
they sound fine.
You'll go home and, get a calendar for next year and...
Check it out, mark it off.
I guess if I had to leave you with one thing, I guess my feeling is I would like to just get the word out ASAP. I don't know that, if we say, we want somebody, people are going to be looking at the lifestyle here, and I mean, it's public education. I can't think that there's that many different bells and whistles that are going to be, I'm not saying that Missoula isn't very unique, but I'm just saying, I guess my feeling is I'd want to know as far ahead as possible, so that we can, get people thinking about it and investigating us, because, I mean, we have to remember that we're not just interviewing and looking for people, they're looking at us too, so,
And
And that's
Kelly-
actually my
yeah.
final comment under,
And one thing,
and you're right, I mean, because part of it is selling
Yeah.
Missoula County Public Schools in Missoula. I mean, because you're trying to attack somebody here as much as, you want a good person here, but you're needing to lure them here somehow, so.
Kelly, before you leave, supplemental question, would you prefer one or not
Yes,
prefer
I
one?
think it's a great
Okay.
idea.
Bye,
and Bob,
guys.
thank you very much
Yeah,
for all
thank
your
you.
work.
Well, just stand and go, Jim, and maybe you
Thank you.
guys would just...
And happy birthday to Betsy.
I'm sure Bob would know about this too.
I have all teenagers now.
Amongst the
my biggest sympathy.
administrators out there, is the word of your resignation must already be resonating somewhat. Is that just a local phenomena, you would think, or regional, or those sorts of things? I mean, I can't imagine the information like Nancy was worried about it turning out. I can't imagine it's something that is already starting to permeate a little bit by word of mouth, sort of thing that you're resignating, I mean, because it's public record, right?
Right.
So,
I would agree with you. I mean,
we don't want to count on that.
Statewide, though.
I don't want to count on it, but I want to just maybe for Nancy's benefit, alleviate her a little bit of her concern that I don't think this is going to catch some candidates by complete surprise that we have an opening.
Well, I mean, statewide, it certainly won't, because it's, I mean, people watch it. I mean, Jim probably knows this, I mean, they sort of ask, who's doing what, where, and, but, beyond the borders of Montana, and there are a group that are, have some sort of roots in Montana that are out there, I mean, whether they're in Oregon, Washington, wherever it is, that are always looking back this direction, and they're probably a pretty...
And they usually have friends who email them and say,
Yeah.
have you seen?
Yeah, so there's certainly that network out there, and that's going to go on a bit.
That was that important. But it is a wonderful segue. I think you even asked the question a little while ago, perhaps rhetorically, that we did want a national search, and I think we all agree that we do want that. However, I want to go on record, and we should probably say that several different times, that it's not necessarily a national search. There may be local people here that would be very well qualified, and we will be always interested in electing those people.
Yeah.
Again, another issue that was brought up by Jack Sturgis, and I wanted to reassure everyone, and I think we should say that several different times, that while we do want to look nationally and get the best, that does not exclude anyone from Missoula being that best person.
Yeah. And that's well said, I'm glad you pointed it out, because I mean, part of my goal as a search consultant is to get the pool as deep as I can get it. That's frankly one of my missions in life now, is to get as many candidates as we can to have you look at. But I certainly want to try to get as much on a local or a statewide level as we can as well. I mean, I think you'll get that to an extent, although, and I could go on a long time about this whole thing, but it's one of the concerns I've had for a long time. I talked before about the numbers diminishing. In Montana, we have a lot of school districts, but and the typical model is starting in Class C districts or B and moving up to A, but we don't have a lot of A districts that have people in them that are looking to make that move at this point. There's a very limited number, I'll put it that way. So the pool wouldn't be very deep if you just stuck to the local folks. At least that's my belief at this point. And it sort of leads us into hopefully the discussion, and I can't remember what I've passed around and not. Hopefully you're not used to paperless meetings, because I'm not very good at doing them. But I want to pass around some information. What folks asked me to do was to make at least a recommendation or talk a little bit about the salary. And certainly that's, a critical component. I mean, I think I've said this before, but you could certainly put the ad out there and not put a salary range on it. But it makes my life really miserable, because I'll start getting my phone ringing off the hook saying, well, so what's the salary? So the question's going to be there whether you put it out there up front or not. And it defines your candidate pool, because you're not going to get somebody that's making $150,000 that'll probably be interested in applying, but you may get them if you don't put anything down. They may say, well, I don't know, maybe they are paying that, so maybe I should look at it, but then they'll pull out later on when they find out what the salary is. So anyway, that's my belief, is that it is important. I threw an article in here about superintendents, and it sort of goes along with my comment about the numbers diminishing, and that's I think, explained a little bit from that article out of Arizona. Some of you may have seen that already. I wanted to go through, and I didn't number the pages, but you'll see behind that article, there's Washington State, Oregon, North Dakota, Idaho, Mississippi. I threw Mississippi and just, I don't know what, I saw that somewhere in it.
We're always being compared to them.
Yeah. What I tried to do is find some districts in these states that had similar either student populations or populations. So that's sort of what my goal was here, is to include as many of those as I could. That other free sheet that I had, I actually sat down with Lance today and I said, I got to try to see if I can get as much information together as I possibly can. You'll see the AASA, and when I use acronyms, the American Association of School Administrators is what that AASA stands for. That's the nationwide, it says mean of average salaries paid, so you'll see what the numbers are there. That's nationwide. So as I considered sort of what recommendation to make to you, I reviewed all of these salaries, sort of on a regional, certainly on a regional basis. This other sheet that you'll see that's sort of small print that I can barely read, hopefully most of you can, is a cost of living page. It's in the packet behind the state information. And I just thought it was interesting, but it's something I considered because we talked about it, is if you're offering $100 to somebody, it's kind of nice if they know that your cost of living is way below the national average or above. In your case, Missoula is, I think, 2.7 above the national average, which isn't terribly high, but, somebody that lives in Springfield, Missouri at 89.4, that's, 11 points below national average, may look and say, gee, the $100,000 I'm making here looks pretty good when I compare it to the cost of living in Missoula, for example. So that's the sort of stuff that you sort of need to factor into this equation. I factored in a whole lot of things. I mean, leadership certainly does matter, and your salary is going to determine, what your pool looks like. I think that you need to be competitive, certainly with other AA districts in Montana. You need to take a look, or at least think about yourselves and other employers in Missoula. I mean, you look at the university system, you look at the hospitals, you look at those sorts of things. I mean, if you look at this in terms of, you're basically hiring a CEO and you've got 8,600 or thereabouts students, I believe. I'm hoping I'm somewhat close in that. That's what I wrote down. I put down a population of 100,000. That's the metro area. That's the number I got. But it's, you could argue it's 70,000 or you could argue it's 100, and you know that drill. But that's sort of the reality of it. You employ, in my estimation, over 1,200 people. You've got an annual budget that I think the last time I looked was in excess of $70 million. That's an all-funds budget, and it might be a little higher than that, and I'm not quite sure. Facilities themselves, you have tens of millions of dollars tied up and invested in facilities around the community, and you're a vital link and connection to community and economic development. I mean, I saw a story again the other day. I follow this stuff pretty closely, and the key element for businesses looking at expansion or location is education. What's the school system like? Can we attract a workforce to come to Missoula? And one of the key things they look at is your school district. And so it's a huge factor in economic development and community development as well. So I guess I just wanted you to make sure you understood sort of the gravity of all of this, because I didn't want you to fall out of your chair when I make my suggestion to you. But again, I sort of looked at my major factors: fiduciary responsibility of trustees. I mean, I've kind of sat in your seat, and I always thought, it's a pretty amazing responsibility to be an elected person that doesn't draw any kind of salary, but you have a $70 million budget that you're overseeing, and all of the things I just mentioned. Staying competitive, focus on student achievement, and the importance of leadership and cost of living. Those are sort of the factors I brought into it, and what I came up with was a salary range between $125,000 and $135,000. That's what my suggestion is to you. Yeah, I
It
figured
sounds
so.
like a lot, but in the research you've done here, I was thinking that 125 might not get us what we're looking for. Because Bozeman's at 125. And how long ago was Bozeman's guy hired? And the ones, when you go nationwide in your information, if you just look at your research, we're not that. There's a lot of Coeur d'Alene, I think.
Well,
Northern Idaho or Napa or some, Twin Falls, I think it was.
Twin Falls.
$150,000 and they're
And
smaller.
it's way smaller.
I wouldn't want to live in Twin Falls, nice place, but it's not Missoula.
See, and that's why I went through, I'm sorry to do that to you, but that's why I went through that long litany of stuff. I mean, I tried to keep an open mind and tried to weigh it, and I tried to look first, of course, and you've seen the numbers that I didn't go through with you that are the other AA districts around Montana. Certainly you need to be competitive with those, I think. I'm not certain even at this range that you would attract any of the people that are in those districts. I mean, if you want to look at it that way, I'm not sure by offering 125 to 135 that you would entice one of them to move from Helena or Bozeman or Billings to here. I just don't think that would happen. I mean, it would be too much of a lateral move if that. But you need to stay competitive with those districts, I think. And boy, you're right on. I mean, that was my logic exactly. That's why I looked at so many different places, and I was sort of shocked by it, frankly, because I started looking at them, I went, wow. I mean, there's districts that are half your size that are paying $140,000, $150,000. So that was a lot of what my thought process was as I went through it.
Question. On your ACCRA cost of living index, fourth quarter 2006, okay, so somebody's compiled these numbers nationally. I was just wondering about housing being 97% of national average. That seems low for Missoula.
Seems very low to me, because I would have guessed that housing, in fact, if you look at Bozeman, by comparison's sake, it's way above on housing, but
Right.
when you look at, I think it was grocery items is the thing that struck me, there's a disparity the other direction between Bozeman and Missoula. So it seemed really skewed to me, but these are this ACRA cost of living index, and you know, you might suspect this comes from Lance. He follows this stuff, and he said this is the group that does this stuff. So, you know, I questioned it myself because I
Yeah,
thought
when you look
housing,
at housing, no,
it
it's the
shocked me,
same in
frankly,
Missoula
because I
as
thought housing
Bozeman.
is out of sight, but
Yeah, it is.
it's,
I can answer those questions if I might.
yeah.
If you looked at Missoula 15 or 20 years ago, it would have said 85%, 87%. And if you look at what the average city is in the country, Missoula is not an average-sized city. We're a smaller community, we're a smaller area, population-wise and density-wise, than your average city. So for us to be at the average level, you're talking about, I don't know, larger cities, larger communities that have more to offer. If you look at it, we're boosting ourselves up here in cost of living for housing to an area higher than what other cities and density of our size are. So we're just hitting national averages of what we're getting to, and
My
we're
question
smaller than
is,
average town.
when Bozeman is 112.8%, I mean, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but Bozeman is, their housing prices,
Housing prices are higher in Bozeman. They have a more lucrative cash flow for housing in Bozeman. Their average house price is higher than Missoula's,
it is, huh?
and their average new construction is higher than Missoula, and they're a smaller town than us.
Yeah. Okay.
I think Jim has a question.
Bob, I don't know the answer to this question. I hate to ask a question to which I do not know the answer. But if you notice that between Bozeman, Kalispell, and us, Bozeman and Kalispell say micro, and we say metro. And I wonder if the comparison is a little bit different, if metro is our whole region, and micro is maybe their city. And I don't know that, Bob, but that may...
I don't know that either, Jim. It's a good question, and I probably should know that too, but I don't. And
A lot of our town is not in the city limits.
Right, which lowers our...
And Kalispell, it is in the city
Yeah.
limits, and so with Bozeman.
It just may have an impact, I don't, on the housing
Oh,
bit.
there you go.
It may have an impact on the
Because
housing.
Lolo and Frenchtown are much
Because you
less
have the
expensive than
outliers,
Missoula
Yeah,
proper.
yeah, that may be what
Thank you.
influenced that.
That's part
There
of
you
it.
go,
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I mean, it's the same thing, and at least I feel like I've been through this with you. before, I have to always caveat salary surveys or this kind of a survey with numbers on it. They're indicators. I mean, you can look at them and learn something from them, but I wouldn't go to the bank with any of these things. They're giving you a picture that's trying to be on a comparable basis of this cost of living and all those different factors. Salaries, there are so many things, and it's so hard. It's one of the hardest things we ever try to do is, and it's a great question, but if you talk to Larry Johnson, he can tell you this. He and I have talked about it a lot, is somebody says to you, go out and find us we want to compare directly, straight across, the salaries in the AA districts in Montana. It is almost impossible to get to the bottom of that and do it, because by the time you get done, then you're on to the next year and you've got a different contract, different numbers, but you've got salary and you've got benefits and you've got different things that are in them. That it's different by individual, it's different by district. You try to do the best you can in comparing those salaries, and I gotta believe there's some reason that those things go. Twin Falls, Idaho, I mean, I think it's a 25,000 population or something, isn't it? And they're paying 150,000. I just don't quite understand it, but there's a reason. Yeah, that's right.
I think Debbie had a question first.
When you say 125 to 135, are you including all of the benefits and where are you on that number and the benefit package?
Good question, and what I'd recommend is you look at that as a salary, and that insurance is something. The only other things that I would say that are outside of that in my mind would be insurance and possibly transportation. I don't know exactly what you do with transportation now, but
He gets a scooter.
yeah, typically that's what people do. I mean, you basically pay mileage or something like that, so it's not usually a significant item anyway, but insurance gets so difficult to try to calculate because it varies by individual, where one person may have 8 kids in the family, another one has their spouse, or they may have a military background and have insurance already covered and don't need it. You know, there's just a wide variety. You know, and you're probably looking at, what, $6,000 to $9,000 for an insurance package, is that?
For health insurance, ours
Yeah.
is 6.9.
Yeah, you know, somewhere in that range is what I figure, so you factor that in, but I would keep that outside. I mean, in my mind, it is outside of the salary number, but it includes. The other thing that, and I only talk about Missoula, or Helena because I know it well, but you've seen it in the numbers. I mean, you'll see their salary number is pretty low, but he's got something like a $20-some thousand annuity. Well, it's because it's an individual that came from Colorado that's never going to get 25 years in Montana in the teacher's retirement system. So that's the way he wants his contract structured, is that the salary tip is, the value of the salary in my mind is whatever the base is. I think it's about 109 plus the 20,000, so it's 129,000 salary, but he takes 20,000 of it into an annuity because of retirement purposes. That's typical. I mean, that's, again, you're talking about an individual and what their preference is and what their life is like at the moment. So that's all stuff you can play with, but that comes out of the 125 to 135 annuities, or however you want the compensation.
I think I heard you suggest that we don't want to leave the salary blank, that we want to put something in.
Yeah.
But did you say whether we should go with a set salary or a range? Which would you recommend for that?
You know, I like the range, and typically, actually, Jim sort of got me started this way on doing a wider range than why I went this direction on it. I've actually come to think that's a good way to go. Typically, I've done in the past like a $5,000 range, but I think you do get into that thing where almost anybody you find you're so close in that range that you're not getting a whole lot of new candidates, but those that you do are going to say, well, obviously I'm very qualified and I want the top end. I think with a range like this, that you will attract some people, some additional folks into it, but you'll also have some people that, when we go to negotiate the contract with them, you look at their salary history and you look at their years of experience and those sorts of things, and it gives me the ability and you the ability to negotiate a little bit better with the individual and say, you know, you were only making, you know, 115 in your previous position, so what I'd like you to consider is, you know, starting on the low end here and then working your way through, and, you know, I think it gives you some more room to negotiate. So I think there is an advantage and a range, because you can suit the different kind of candidates you're going to get.
I don't think at that range, that $10,000 is going to mean somebody's going to take a job or not take a job. You're talking about less than 10% of their salary. We're not talking about somebody who makes $40,000, $30,000 is a big difference.
Yeah.
So I don't think that a range of $10,000 is going to matter to the individual one way or the other. If you put in their salary in the range of $130,000, you know, it may be higher, it may be lower. But I think one of our biggest sources here for information on these questions is Jim. I mean, at the time he came here, why did he come here? Was it the salary? Was it Missoula? You know, what was the reasons for coming? Or the salary range? Is $10,000 going to make any difference to most of these candidates? See, I don't know that it will. And I don't know if Jim wants to answer any of these questions, but he's certainly one of our best resources. He's the only person we've got in this room who went through this process and got the job.
Outside of Bob. Oh, yeah, he didn't get the job. I can tell you that there was a $10,000 range when I came here, and what I negotiated, I had a very specific issue about that range, because it was 95 to 105. There's a breaking that boundary here was significant, because I didn't want to come here and in a year try to do that. Then the people have an issue about going over 100,000. So that, for me, that was an issue. In terms of why I looked at Missoula, most of you know this, that the primary reason was that we had family close by. And then we looked at the district. The way I found out about this opening was through my son. He said, "Dad, Missoula's open." So I wasn't looking at Missoula. I was looking at a geographic area. We were looking at Montana or California because of our family. You may not have that in any other candidates that you see, but that was a significant issue for me. Then the quality of the district and some of the issues, some of the things that you were facing here that I thought I could impact made a huge difference for me. I would not come to what I thought was a poor school district, even if it was in my kid's hometown. So I had that filter after looking at the geographic sense. So and you may not ever see another person like that, that wants to have some kind of proximity to family, or the quality of life here appeals to me too, as you well know. And I would not really wanted to go to California. We looked at California districts, talked to the Bob Vogel of California, I talked to the Bob Vogel of New Mexico. I happen to like a lot of places in New Mexico. So that, I was looking at very specific kinds of things, quality of life, family. The salary was important once we got to that point, but not before I got through those other filters.
What about the fact that our school district may be under, I can't remember the term now, but have problems with our testing issue?
We're in corrective action.
Corrective action.
Personally, if I'm looking at this district now, if I would ask you about that and about what was being done to address that. That's why the first thing I put on what I suggested you need in the next superintendent is somebody with a good curriculum instruction background, because I think you're really going to be looking at those issues. And you as a board, I think, will struggle with some of the things that may need to be done to address that. That's my own opinion about that, Rick.
Would that keep you from coming here?
No. Depends on you. Depends on what you're looking at. Are you interested in that, or are you just saying, yeah, that's just No Child Left Behind, we're not going to deal with that? So, two different ways of looking at that.
I knew we'd eventually get here, the 135,000, because Great Falls is there. I assume that Billings must be even more. How much is Billings?
It isn't on the sheet, but it's
Much higher or a little higher?
I'm not going to say much higher, but the total value of it's probably in the 140, 145 range.
Okay, so you're within there. Okay, now, we have some real practical issues we have to face. We have, you understand that everybody's going to tell you, oh, you got to have the best this, best that, but nobody will want to pay for one. And the other is that your staff all thinks that any dime you give the superintendent is less money for them. And so we will hear input about, that's a lot of money and all this or that, but they'll still want all the qualities of a person who makes that kind of money. I would kind of support, think of that in mind, doing a range of 125 to 135 to get us through the, if you're cheap, you'll think 125 and, on the salary portion. But that gets you to the point of the interviews. And then you would then have the ability to do some sort of negotiations. The superintendent salary pulls all the other salaries up. It just does. It'll pull everything up. Good unions should support a highly paid superintendent. I'm always surprised when they don't, because it pulls it up, see. And this spring, now, we're already going to get, 1%, 1.5%, a second year of our...
1.6.
1.6, okay.
On the base.
On the base,
Yeah.
right. I mean, and we're still going to have all those steps and lanes, and we're still going to have our regular everything, our committed. And if we're heading into negotiations, and they'll say, well, you're paying your superintendent 135, you obviously have the money to pay us. I think we just have to be put it right out there.
Maybe we should start at a range of 120.
I don't know if that'll make any difference. I think we have to start at the same rate that we pay our existing superintendent.
How do we know we're going to get somebody as good as him?
It's up to us to search for somebody who will do that.
Otherwise, Jim can't leave.
I don't think he gets to leave anyway. We haven't voted on it.
Well, and then I wish I could make some guarantees to you, but the only thing I can try to do is, like I said, increase the numbers in the pool. My belief is the more people you can convince and attract here, the better selection you have and the better quality that you'll end up with in the end. So, and certainly salary is part of that. It's part of that attraction. Jim talked about some of the other stuff, and that's all part of it. Selling the district on quality of life.
Our scenery, the trees.
But you will have, people that, like Jim, that have maybe had another career in another state, that may be able to look here where someone else may not be able to. Somebody's earlier in their career and they're making the same salary or a little bit more, whether they'd be willing to come here for the quality of life and draw lesser salary, probably not as likely. So the economics is one of the factors in it. Quality of life is certainly one of them. Quality of the school district is another. It's all those factors, and we just hope that we can have the right combination of all those, that we can attract a good group of people for you.
You keep forgetting about the quality of the board.
Oh, obviously I should have.
You do have
That was terrible.
And forgive me, because I looked at the figures that Larry set out, but your total compensation was 100 and, wasn't it 140?
It's about 140.
And so...
If you include the insurance.
And so billings at 135 still only comes out to 140. So.
With everything? With the whole compensation package?
Well, that's what Bob said.
No, I was thinking 140, 145 is what I'm thinking is billings.
For the whole compensation package.
Salary is roughly 130, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff in there, so.
But what I'm saying is that a salary of 125 and a salary of 130 still comes out to a total compensation package
Around 100.
about the same.
Well, it depends on what else you negotiate, Scott, because I do and any superintendent does an individually negotiated contract. And so it really does depend on what the person needs and what the board is willing to provide.
Another factor in billings, isn't it lower because it's an interim superintendent?
Jack's salary.
He's not interim anymore, but they actually raised his salary considerably after he served a year as an interim, and they convinced him to stay on, but he's on an annual basis, but the only way he'd even stay for the annual term was to have a fairly decent boost in his salary. It's, like I said, the salary itself, I think, is in the 130 range is my recollection, and then it kind of has the other stuff on top of that, so.
I was just kind of wanting to check to make sure that I wasn't, being real cheap. But I kind of like Rick's suggestion of 120 to 130. Because, I mean, we've got an experienced and excellent superintendent at 125. We've got a great city, we've got a great school district, we've got a great school board. I am not really particularly interested in the person who's coming here for the highest salary. They may be here for a year or two and then bounce to the next district that can pay them a little bit more. We have Sealy Lake. I mean, what can we say?
Taking up their water.
I could go with the 125 to 135, but you have to convince me a little bit more that 120 to 130 wouldn't be sufficient.
I just don't think you could pay somebody less than the existing superintendent.
A first year, a guy with his brand new PhD.
We paid him less his first year.
No.
No, we didn't. He got the same salary or more.
Well, it was 100 and something, but it was less than that. He rose up to
More
this
than the
level.
previous superintendent.
And it went up as fast as inflation or less than
But the
inflation?
point was, it was, the previous superintendent, he
Yeah,
paid more
yeah.
when he came.
But he wasn't his first year in teaching, superintendent. I mean, we could get an outstanding candidate that has very limited experience.
Were you superintendent?
But I mean, look at all the experience that he had. Well, I'm talking, we could get a 30-year-old kid that we are just very impressed with all the other stuff that's going on in his resume and such.
Actually, I'm looking for a 50-year-old kid.
Thanks. It's all relative. Okay, convince me to raise my...
I think we may get candidates that aren't as qualified as Jim. And I think they're gonna know that when they come in the door. They already know.
Well,
where
we're
he
not
came
gonna
from, what he
hire
is.
them.
No.
Well, let's hope we get as qualified a candidate. But let's say we don't. What are we gonna do? We're gonna have to offer them 135 because that's what.
No,
No, we
don't
go for
hire
another
them.
panel. We go for another
We
group of...
start over.
We work with an interim until we hire someone we like.
Yeah. But we don't want to hire somebody for $5,000 less just because, well, we got to settle. It's the best we can do. I mean, we have to get a qualified person in here. We've got too much at stake.
At this point, I just would like to report to you what Tom Orr, because he couldn't be here tonight, hunter safety for his son. Big moment.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Anyway, he said that basically he trusts us to make a good decision, that he recommends we get a market survey, that he's very happy with $125,000 on the base, but he wants everyone to understand exactly how much the entire benefit package is worth, and that we make sure we're very clear about that, and that we include the cost of the insurance contribution. He thinks that we should compare Missoula with the rest of the Northwest, that we're comparing apples to apples. And good luck.
Macintosh to Spartans.
That is very difficult. We know in the past, and individually in my profession, that we were dealt with in union negotiations and stuff that, has used salary surveys in the past, and basically it did not work out as well as they probably originally intended for that to do, just because it was a lot muddier, less clear, and they did not end up having from either side, it becomes a very sticky wicket. So just like you were saying, Bob, I mean, it's a tool to use and it's part of the toolbox, but relying on that too much is problematic. There are other issues involved. Well, it's just because of the sparse population of the northwest part of the country, even though we might think we're more crowded and stuff, it really is, once you get out of a region, are you really comparing the same sort of things? Kansas, Texas, maybe not.
See, and I tried to do the region, and it's tough, because, Washington State, basically, they told me, in order to get truly the full salary survey, we'd have to pay about $500 just to get it. And that was not us, but it would have been that my counterpart in Washington State said he couldn't get it, but this is all he could glean from him, is this range. You'll see Oregon and it's sort of range stuff. I mean, we can get sort of specific by district. North Dakota, they have this, Fargo, $155,000, an additional $10,000 in merit pay. The market analysis you do in these things, like I said before, it gets really squirrely in a hurry because there's all these different things that get added in, and
How much
it's
support do
really
they get
hard.
from their legislatures?
I mean, yeah, and I guess I just don't know that you ever truly get to a point where you're apples to apples on these things. I mean, again, it's an indicator, and it's something that you need to look at and sort of analyze and think about, but I'm not sure that I'm not sure I should say it this way, but go to the bank with some of these numbers and say, oh man, if we can just match this number, we're in good shape, because that number may have some other stuff behind it, so.
Hey, Scott, may I say one thing in direct response to your question?
Sure.
See if you can convince me. Whoever is going to move here has to buy a house in this town. Jim bought his house 5 years ago.
What about my town?
I don't know that that's going to be a big issue by next summer.
Well, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see what happens. So far, the values are holding fairly well compared to...
They're not going up in...
Not going up, but they're certainly higher than they were 5 years
And
ago.
by Jim's house?
Yes. We'll just give them Jim's
Yeah.
house. That's part of the deal.
It's a parsonage. Or build it right across the street. We could build a new eminent domain. That would be part of it.
Remodel Homevale?
My wife might have something to say about this.
She's staying.
But,
It's not a bad
if Tom's happy, I mean, he's saying 125. These guys are cheap over here. I heard Kelly say, anyway, I'm not sure what Nancy came up with.
Nancy said 125.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're all, and we're not caucusing, are we? We're just kind of getting an idea of so you're saying the 125 to 135, 125 to 135?
I say 125 at the bottom. If we
Right.
do a range, I want to go up from there.
Right, 125, 135, 125, 135.
125, yeah, bottom.
Joe?
I'd go with that.
So yeah,
Bob's doing his own there, and that's
with the
what we're paying
125 and
Here comes
135.
Jim, you can ask him.
Yeah.
Oh, he's already, we know him, it's 125 and 135. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're outvoted, let's go, 125, 135.
What about it?
And the only notion I was gonna respond to your notion of doing a 130, what'd you say, the range of, the neighborhood or range of 130.
Yeah.
I think you don't buy yourself a lot with that. I mean, you're basically saying the same thing, and you're almost giving up the 5,000 between 125 and 130, because when you say in the range of, and you say that number, then you don't have, to try to get down below that number is really tough. But if you're at 125 to 135, in certain circumstances, I think I can get below 130.
We have a contract to negotiate this year. Is that in April or May, or when does that happen?
With the union,
Yeah.
it'll take place over many months in the spring. Will it be spring?
Well, so,
But it'll be done before July when we pick a
I
superintendent.
wouldn't bet that.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah.
The last 2 contracts have been
Half.
right up to the school year.
Do we want to give ourselves a range, though, so that they don't come to us and say, you're raising your superintendent's salary, or you're offering to, or do we want to make sure that And by saying 125, we're staying at the same number, but do we want to have a negotiating point that it might not be that high?
Well, they're going to gripe no matter what we say.
I agree.
We need a motion, and we need a vote on this issue.
Okay.
Debbie?
I make a motion that we offer the 125 to 135, and that gives us room to negotiate.
Second?
Second.
By Tony. Now, more discussion? Public comment?
Do a public comment. I guess I would urge you to be more cautious about the range. I would have preferred to make this comment as a whole. It seems like you've taken this one piece out for action right now. I think that the process is really good that you're doing, but I do think that I appreciated the comments that Rick made about we don't know what the pool of candidates will be at this point, and if we did get a good candidate, but from a small district that could be, working at $80,000 a year now to jump such a huge salary range, it might not be necessary to bring them here if that's, there's a trade-off between a question, which we don't know the answer of, will we get the candidates? Will we get the pool of candidates? And I understand the point of trying to shake loose the best candidates, but that I actually have had a question in my mind that I don't, maybe Bob could help to answer it, which is I don't quite understand if a school district, if it takes so long to hire a superintendent from another district, are we only getting candidates who are already dissatisfied in some way? Because, in other words, if we make a decision to hire somebody in March, then they must have already made their decision that they're ready to leave their district, correct? So, do you see the question that I'm getting? I'm just sort of wondering if we're already limited to a pool of somewhat unhappy relationships in one way or the other?
This is a comment on the motion, and maybe I don't know if you want to act on the motion, and then I can make a comment? Okay. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do.
Yeah. Oh, well, why don't we hold that?
Okay.
And finish this.
So I guess that all I would say is that is an impact on how I would feel about the salary range. Just because I think you may be going too far. And I support what I've heard Scott and Rick say about the range. I think you have, in some ways, it may bring a superintendent with some difficulties when the general public may not understand how much other superintendents are making, or that may not be the most important thing when you measure it against the many teachers who wish that they could get equity with, equal pay with what other districts are making. So I think it's going to be a hard thing for the public to understand and jump on board and say, yes, we really think that if you go up to $135,000 on the salary and then add another $20,000 in benefits, it may actually saddle the new superintendent with something that they have to prove. I certainly want, the best candidates, but in everything that I have read about real leadership, and what I also heard from Dr. Clark is that often those are not the actual determining factors. It is a matter of, yes, it may shake loose some more candidates, but I would say start around at a lower salary range, and if you don't get adequate candidates, you could extend the search, especially if you're advertising earlier. Or I like the idea of offering a big increase in pay after someone has proven themselves after their first year of their contract. If you really, I don't think it will I think the trade-off of what we're going to have to explain or win the public support for may not outweigh how many actual more qualified candidates raising the salary to this high range is going to shake loose. I hope you'll be more conservative in the pay advertised.
Rick?
I think I'm out of turn, but it rose a question in my mind that Bob might be able to answer. What is the reason for not saying salary range from 115 to what we think is our cap, around 135 somewhere? Why not give it a wider range? Why are we thinking we gotta be stuck up here within $10,000? We're not gonna lose anybody that's already looking at 135. And I think we may get a couple people that are looking at 135 going, well, I'm not gonna qualify for that position, but I might qualify for one at 115. Maybe they'll let me in. Maybe they're willing to take somebody who's not quite so perfect, and I'll go ahead and apply. But it may be that we end up with the right person. I mean, I don't know why do we have to be in such a tight salary range?
You want to answer?
Yes.
Okay, Rick?
Because the first question anybody will be asking is how much are you paying your current superintendent?
He may be better than that.
That has nothing to do with it.
But it does.
In your mind, maybe.
I hired people for 10 years, and I hired people for less than the person leaving got regularly, because they didn't have the experience, they hadn't been there, and they hadn't proven themselves.
But had you, that may be true, but this is a public entity where all this knowledge is public.
Well, even if we told them what it was, it didn't matter. You gotta prove yourself. This isn't a here you go, now show me how good you are. This is back to not public entities, but running something a little more like a business would be run. You don't just hand out a salary and say, come and get it, here's your big bucket, do the best you can. Say, here, you give them a package, like, you get 115, and if you want to work really hard the first year and you solve our problems or this if you can.
Did you read this?
He just gave it to me, I didn't read all of it, no. Is that what it says?
We're not going to have that big pool of qualified people coming through the door.
Oh, I got that part.
Yeah.
Well, but still, what business in Montana that has a salary of 125 gets more than 12 or 20 people at a job? I don't think there's that many people out there in that range. I don't think it's got to do with just because it's a superintendent job. I think if you went to Washington Corp and asked them to find you somebody at that 125 range to run a certain department, they're going to end up with about the same number of people qualified or wanting the job. I think it's just because we're looking for a superintendent. I think it's just, when you get to that range, there's not that many people.
That may be.
Anyway, does Bob have any reason why we can't say 115 to 135? And that's an exaggeration, but.
Well, I sort of hesitate to comment when you've got a motion on the table, but, I think you can do that, certainly. There's no reason you can't do that. In my mind, you're sort of trying to stay competitive, and it's sort of all the factors I talked about before. You're trying to stay competitive. You're not saying that you're going to be able to backtrack enough that if you found somebody that maybe had less experience than your current superintendent, or their salary history was less, what you're saying in my mind is you need somebody equally as talented with the equal amount of potential as Jim has today. I mean, they may not be there, and they probably aren't going to be there yet when they come in the door, but that's the kind of individual you're looking for. You're not really looking for somebody I don't think your expectation should be a Class B district in Montana, that somebody's going to step out of there and be able to step into Missoula and be a good, strong superintendent for you right off the bat. So, I guess I don't know that that answers that question or not. I think you could do a bigger range, but I think there's a lot to be said for, I had to be convinced to go to a $10,000 range. To go much beyond that, I'm just not sure that you get yourself a whole lot by doing that.
I've only worked with Jim for a short period of time. I haven't worked with other superintendents, but the quality of person that he is, I do not think that it's gonna be easy to find anybody at that level. I really don't. And it might be my own fears, but I don't know that we're gonna find it at that level. And I think we're gonna end up paying somebody the same amount of money who's not gonna do as good a job. And maybe that's what it's worth, and we've underpaid him the whole time, but, I can look at it that way too. Maybe we've been underpaying him, and we should have paid him more.
We got a bargain.
Yeah, and maybe now we need to pay that much to get somebody that's not gonna be as good.
Nobody's irreplaceable, even.
Well, I understand, yeah, if anybody can leave and we can replace them.
Any further board discussion? Jim, would you like to share any information on this topic before we leave it?
No, you can vote, but I want to talk to Carol just a little bit.
Okay. All right, all those in favor of the motion to set the salary range of $125,000 to $135,000? Opposed? 2 opposed, Rick and Scott. Motion passes.
Carol, I want to let you know that I didn't make my retirement announcement because I was unhappy or was in trouble here. And neither did I leave my last district under those circumstances. That board did not want me to leave there, and I was very appreciative of that. We're all in different, superintendents are all in different spots. And so, from a personal standpoint, when I looked first, it was family-oriented. And you may find some superintendents that are not in that position, whose boards really do want them to go, or in fact have said, you need to go. You will probably find some like that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that person was not successful. It does mean that, given the current situation, they're not successful. And so that's another strange thing for our community to consider, because when you're looking at someone that may have gotten fired or may have been asked to leave, it doesn't mean that they were not successful. It means that the circumstances had changed enough that they were no longer successful, and they may not have changed with that or been willing to change with that. The world of a superintendent is extraordinarily complex, and you know that. You've worked with us and you've watched it. It's extraordinarily complex, and there are many people that have skills that are much stronger than mine in some areas, and some others that probably don't have skills in areas that I may be strong in. But you're going to see that as you go through this process, and how you match up those skills and what's needed here is the most important thing. Thanks for letting me preach a little bit.
Thank you.
Can I preach too for just a second?
Yes, Scott.
I heard this at MCL, I think it was 2 years ago, where a board did oust the superintendent, basically. And this is about 5 to 7 years downstream from that. And they talked about the board was reconfigured again and again, finally had come back to consensus and was a well-established working relationship board. But it took them many years to recover to get superintendents to come there because of the issues with that board. So Jim's absolutely correct, because somebody left does not necessarily mean that they're a bad superintendent.
No, it really doesn't.
Look at that very carefully. And to go on, that was a facetious comment somewhat about we have a good board here, but I think also that word gets out. People will understand that and realize that we have a functioning board that works well together. And I think that's a real plus for our superintendent.
Absolutely.
I can guarantee, and I know that I've gone around the horn a lot of times, but the board question, I guarantee I'll get from candidates. The other question that I'll guarantee that I'll get is, why is the current superintendent leaving and under what circumstances? Anybody that's applied, Jim knows that. I mean, that's what those are the questions they're going to ask, and I'll be able to say this is a great, solid board. You know, they work well together. They're not in lockstep, well, obviously every time, but I don't think any superintendent's looking for that. But it's not a dysfunctional board by any means, and that's the kind of stuff that people are going to be looking at.
Significant.
And especially, I mean, you've got a great advantage that Jim is leaving on a positive note, and you're not sort of riding him out of town, because that's the first question I always get. So why is the current superintendent leaving? That's just natural. They want to know that. Because if he's been here a couple of years and is being run out of town, and they're in a fairly stable situation, they may not want to take that risk career-wise. But in your case, that's a great advantage,
Yeah.
because you've got a good place, good community, good school district, good board, all of those factors working in your favor, so.
I have one comment that the cameraman had made, that has Missoula ever not passed a bond issue?
Since, in my experience here, the community has supported the building reserves and the general fund levies, THEC levies. The $20 million bond issue was the last one that was a bond issue that was passed. There were some years ago when you were allowed to run general fund levies more than once, and I think there were a few times when the board had to do that. But in the end, the community did support it.
They were voted down several times, and finally on the third time.
But that is a good deal.
It's a tremendous thing
That's
for a
huge.
superintendent
You don't have to
coming in.
Fight for your dollars?
Yeah.
Well, you do, but.
Different.
Well, then the other piece, this afternoon, Joel Baird did a little piece with me, a 6-minute piece about the building reserve that's coming up, because it's so hard to get the information out to our people. This is a mail-in ballot. We're going to have a different group of people send those back than may have gone to the polls. And so getting the word out about why do we need a building reserve? This is a $10 million price tag over 10 years. It's not a bond. And so helping people understand that bond issue is different from the building reserve and why we need this. So that as we put out the advertising about that, please do talk to your neighbors about that and your friends, because of what the need is and what the actual impact on their tax bill will be. If you have a $200,000 valued home, your actual increase is going to be about $3.40 a year because of the rising assessed valuation and how that affects our general fund levies. It's not $24.42, which in itself is not a whole lot. It's $2 a month plus. But people just need to understand that. What then we can support in our schools?
We're a bargain.
It's a bargain.
But the fact that we've even got that coming up, I think would be great for any superintendent coming in here to know
Absolutely.
that the dollars are already on their way
Absolutely.
to try to fix things.
Yep.
And now if we can just get perfect test scores.
We won't have perfect test scores, Rick, but what we're doing to address that is the important thing. And it's response to intervention, and it's a new implementation of our communication arts. I'm preaching again. I'll get off it.
No, go ahead, because I need to know
How much
this
more
before
are
asking me.
we doing tonight?
Yeah,
We've been 2.5.
I'm sorry, Jenda.
We've been 2.5 hours. I have a housekeeping question. We have the idea of a supplemental question to decide, because that has to go in the ad, so it's something we have to decide. But before we get to that, we have a report that Tony and Jim have prepared for us from their interviews with administrators on this topic. And I don't know how much time that's going to be. Again, I want to give it all the time.
And,
Okay.
and, I'd just like to say in opening our presentation, that if you would like to spend more time on this, we are happy to come back and revisit it. But at least for my part, I'll try to be very brief because we are late. One handout, well, let me start at the beginning. As elementary vice chair and secondary vice chair, Jim and I were asked by the chair to do interviews with administrators, to talk to them about what qualities and qualifications they would like to see in the new superintendent, and what direction they would like to see the district take at this juncture. And so Jim and I spoke today after we had a chance to compile all our notes, and we had this, the same issues that came to the surface, as Jim mentioned earlier, were on both of our pages. So that's what we'd like to summarize for you tonight. Also, in preface of that summary, I would like to say that Bob has also asked us to continue this process by visiting with some community leaders on a one-to-one basis. And if other board members would like to join in that process, Jim and I are happy to have you do that, because it was such a valuable experience for us. And I'm speaking for both of us because we talked on the phone today just to make sure that we were on the same page with what we saw. So I have his permission to say that we both feel that way. It was a very valuable experience. And as we went through Bob's presentation tonight, so much of what I learned from these interviews kept answering questions that are on this page. One principal that we interviewed about half of our principals and some central office people, recommended this handout to us. And as we looked this over, we both thought it was so valuable that we would like to have a copy made. And so Trudy and Carol made copies for everybody. And so when you have a minute to look this over, we believe that this will give you a little more insight into what we want to do with our interview process, what kinds of questions we want to ask, and what kinds of answers we want to hear in response to those questions. And also, what are the items that we want to identify in the ad that we send out that we're looking for, okay? In our earlier conversation tonight, and this is how I thought before I had a chance to sit down with these individuals, I thought, well, we all kind of know where we want to go, and Bob had read to us in our earlier little briefing an ad from Great Falls, and I thought, those are wonderful points that Great Falls is looking for. There are 4 major items of interest, but those don't really match our district right now. And again, I reflected on the things that we heard from administrators in the district and began to understand that as a body, I mean, as Jim said earlier, each person has their own areas of interest depending on their position in the district. But as a whole, there was a collection of thoughts that came together. And they ring true for me. So we just want to talk to you about those just a little bit. One of the things that really helped me think about where we are and where we're going is to look back and see where we've been. And I reflect where our district was 5.5 years ago when Jim came. And I think about the qualities that you brought to our district and how well they matched, in my opinion, the needs of our community and our district at that time. And again, in my opinion, and I think a lot of other people have shared this opinion orally, that you have moved us through those needs and brought us to a new juncture. And as some of the principals with whom we spoke said, and now we're at a place where we are ready for perhaps a new set of skills. And what the item that was listed by every single person with whom we spoke was, we are really poised and ready now for an academic and instructional leader who is well-versed in current trends and is an academic visionary, has cutting-edge knowledge of educational issues. So that's number 1.
Right, and to solicit these questions, we asked, I think, answers. We asked 4 questions. One was, what type of leader do they envision? We asked them, I guess it was only 3, wasn't it? And we also prefaced it to say we didn't want to critique on Jim's administration. We didn't want to go any out of that, and we really didn't get it. What were some of the good things about our district? I mean, what are some of the excellent things? And what are some of the deficits? And that kind of enlisted their comments, and that's how we went through. But the educational leadership was probably was the best. One said that they wanted a transformational leader, someone that could help us transform into this higher educational needs. Technology was something that folks were talking about. We need to get better in touch with technology. And of course, with the educational leadership, almost everybody brought up the NCLB issues. We have to be aware on how to apply them and how to, what was that word you used? Of the alignment.
The alignment of curriculum.
Alignment of curriculum is important. Now, they're not saying this isn't what's happening, but they're saying this is what things that need to be emphasized. Isn't that about?
Right. The second item that came to the surface in the majority of interviews was someone who is willing to understand the uniqueness of our community and manage community relations based on who we are and not based on what they think a community our size might be.
Right.
And continue on what Jim has already put in place for us, that good relationship we have with the community.
how to deal with our diverse population and how to articulate our needs and plans to the community needs to be done.
Right. And the third area that emerged in sort of different ways, that took on a personal framework with different people, but the same kernel, if you will, that emerged, is that we're really ready for someone who has very high expectations of staff
Right.
and students, and is willing to invest in training of administrators, and is willing to be involved and very present in the schools.
And
Schools, I'm sorry.
in the schools.
Involved and
Oh.
present in the schools.
And one of the questions which was interesting, part of this, one of the administrators told us that when we're asking questions, we should be asking the candidate, what do they intend to do within the first quarter, first 100 days if they were hired? What were some of the programs what they were doing? And also, we should ask for demonstrated in their resumes and their actions of innovative programs that they've had in the past.
So as Jim and I were kind of processing what we heard, we thought, in addition to asking questions in our interview process about what you've done and seeing the results of those in the portfolio that we'll ask for, we also want to ask, and how did you accomplish that?
Right.
So that we begin to get a sense of what kind of process this person uses in interpersonal relations and getting from point A to point B, and if that fits with our staff and our community.
And if you check these standards, the last one in each one of the standards is performances. The administrator facilitates, processes, engage in activities ensuring that. And, you know, if we look through these performances, that will elicit the kind of information we know that they in fact have done, they have the knowledge that we're asking for. So I thought that was an excellent clue. And these standards are something that is, I think they appear to be well researched. I didn't see the research behind it, but they have that feeling. And also the person who handed them to us assured us that they were. But also it gives us the language necessary so that we're all communicating on the same level. So this is really important to be using the language in your questions and when you're looking, the verbiage that's used here, because if you're asked the question using this type of language, you'll get a response, so that you'll be getting good information and not just fluff, right?
Yeah. So in summary, and this might be, if you decide to go in this direction, it might be another work session, but a general suggestion that emerges that we as a board lay out the work that needs to be done in our district from here, and we might include those in succinct phrases in what we advertise. And then our question is, are you the person who can do that? And our job is to look for goodness of fit.
We've already done a lot of that work, as far as where the district is going. We already have a plan.
Well, I don't think we've really discussed it in the framework of what kind of administrator is going to need to implement that. And until we have an idea exactly what we're looking for, you see, as a board, it's going to be difficult to frame that questions. And that's why the questionnaires that we're sending out, having everybody, will help us some information. But also, if you read through these standards, you'll suddenly realize, well, damn, I don't know anything about anything. I better.
Yeah. And as we look at our strategic plan, I think is that what you're referencing? To my mind, I want to look at that and overlay that with what kinds of skills and capabilities do we want our new superintendent have in order to carry that strategic plan forward?
Yeah, and we're going to have to prioritize.
I think we are, yeah.
So I have a question for you guys. Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
That's all
So
right.
funny, Chair. This sounds very exciting, and I'm so glad that you guys did this, and thank you for taking, because I know it took a lot of time. And I'm sure it was much appreciated on the receiving end.
They were
too.
so happy we came.
Yeah, so that's
Asked us to keep coming.
kudos. My question is this something that is a process that we talk about for the next few months to frame the interview questions at the end?
Yes.
Or is this something that we have to do more quickly in order to write the advertisement?
I think both.
Okay.
I think that we can get the kernels to put in the ad with another meeting of this sort, but then to actually lay out our questions with the look-fors, the answers that we want to hear, I think that's going to take more time.
And then Debbie had her hand, and one of you guys was first, I don't know which one.
Because I'm going to have to go.
Okay.
So,
Come to Sealy Lake, come on.
and if you'll come to City Lake and stay until 9 o'clock, I would be thrilled.
It's never
Take one session for this there.
You can do that. If I understand you, are you going to keep doing this? He asked you to keep,
Bob suggested, he has a new thing that he'd like to try out in Missoula, and that is that we do this kind of interview with community members.
I have several things. First, can we do some of this in City Lake with?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, because we are a unique district in that one of your high schools is 60 miles away.
Right.
And I don't want to hire a superintendent who wants to lock me off.
Right.
So,
Can't do that.
and that's huge, and I think that I have some people in my community that would, and I have teachers and stuff that also have opinions. And I just, speaking for them, I'm pretty sure that they'd like to give you something.
And I think they'll be in one of Bob's groups who he interviews teachers.
Okay,
He's going to do groups.
okay.
And we didn't do every administrator. We just
Oh,
did a
I
set.
know that.
Yeah.
And I understand that, but I think that when you do it, some of mine should be in a group.
Yes, they should.
And maybe they were, you know, I don't know. I just, not knowing, I thought I would just
And we could
ask.
talk to you about maybe going out and doing some interviews of business people.
Yeah, and I'd be more than happy to set something up.
Okay, even correlate it with next week's meeting? I mean, as long as we're in town?
Okay.
Or a second trip?
Yeah, set us up some meetings.
For next Tuesday?
Yeah,
You want me to try and do that? When do you want to do it?
I can't be at that meeting, but Jim's going to be there.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Yes.
you and I could go, I could come up a little earlier and we'll go around and we'll do the same thing with some key people or a teacher or whatever, and we can invite anybody else who wants to come with us. But I just think that the more information we get, the more that everybody feels that they've had an input, that their opinion is important, the easier it is for us to go down, but when we're going to end up paying that big salary that nobody wants to pay, it will become important.
We don't have a lot of time, so,
You guys can get together.
yeah, if you just want to give
Just
me a
email.
call.
Why don't you just email me when you have the appointments?
No, phone. Let's not email.
That's ministerial. You would say that.
Yeah.
I have it sounds like, and I may be completely off on this because I've only been following this around for a few years, really. It sounds like Jim has set us up pretty well as far as fixing our buildings, rearranging some buildings, putting our buildings and things in order, and getting us from the place we were up to now. And I don't know what it has all been to get there, I really don't. But I kind of need to know so that I know where we just came from. I think I have an idea where we came from, but I might be completely wrong. And what is left to do right now, which I think is what he set us up pretty well, to be taking care of the things that need to be taken care of in the future. But I'd like to know what they were, where we're at right now, and where we need to go. and I think, I have an idea, but he's the one that really knows. Can I ask that question, or is this going to take too long?
We're at 3 hours for this meeting. Is that
I'll call it.
It's not a piece that we need to do tonight.
Okay.
It's an important piece. And of course, we'll do that. But I think we need to finish this agenda
If we could get the other action.
and adjourn for tonight.
Maybe Jim can just.
But Scott had a question?
Send us all one.
Again, I want to echo your sentiments. Thank you so much to Fort County and to Jim for taking the time to do that. I'm really excited about this, and I can't wait for the first person to come up to me and say, well, you didn't involve the community, you didn't, I'm just going to laugh, probably maniacally, but they might have to shut me up, but I'm really excited. The question I have for you is, what level of detail are you asking us to come up with? Are we talking building-specific problems that we want solved, personnel issues that we all know exist in this district and have them solved, or are we talking more
Categories.
more broader categories?
Well, our administrators have suggested one, that they want an educational leader, meaning an academic leader.
Right. Strong academician.
Who's involved with curriculum development and things. Now, that's
What does that mean? I'm sorry, I'm just not quite sure I
Okay.
understand.
Well, short form, I mean, I'd love to sit
Read it
down and
in
have a
here, okay.
conversation. Again, if we decide we want to do a work session, there's lots of detail that we can go through with you. But there are some answers to that understanding too here.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this tells you what that really means.
Okay.
Right.
When someone uses academic leadership, what does that mean? Well, here kind of explains it.
Well, I would not be, I was going to be a little concerned about getting into some very specific issues in this district, but if it's a little more general scale, I would
Yeah,
favor
Right.
it's
that.
kind of like an academic leader.
Right, so that we can look for skills. And, and again, I think if there are particular questions we want to write, we also want to write the answers that we're looking for. A question was suggested to us. What innovation are you going to bring to you from your bring to us from your current position? Describe that innovation and how you developed it, or your part in developing it. That one question gives us so much information about how a person thinks, what their knowledge base is, what their process is, how they work with other people.
We may want a more general question, I don't know. But it's important for us we have to understand what we're looking for. See, we haven't really discussed that yet. As we've set a salary now. We've set a process, but the board hasn't really decided what kind of who do we think we need, what kind of a person we need. We have a process for the public to tell us, for the teachers to tell us, and so forth, and maybe you should reserve all your judgments or research until they've all told you. That's one way to look at it. But I think it's something we should be doing simultaneously while we gather that information, and we should be researching, and one way to do that is carefully read over these standards, and that will tell you some things.
So I think we probably need to set another date at some point, but for another work session, because this is a very interesting conversation.
Can I make a suggestion? Can we all, I was going to say I want to ride with Jim because he's got some of the answers now, but can we actually arrange for a bus to take us up to Sealy Lake that is quiet enough that we can actually communicate for that hour all the way up there?
No.
That's
You have
radio
the
for
public.
public.
Oh.
Sorry,
Bring Craig along.
I'm sorry, I forgot
we
about
can't do
that.
that.
You plug that into a cigarette lighter?
You can do that as long as you don't discuss
3
your
hours
district
going down,
business.
right?
Roads.
Yeah, so you're not supposed to discuss anything.
So let's just finish up our agenda here tonight, and then Carol will probably query us about a date for another meeting, and yes, Scott?
Sealy Lake's going to be a short meeting. Could we put another quick one on after that? We're not going to go to Sealy Lake to involve them any other time, probably, other than a small meeting. I would as soon spend an extra hour up there. Maybe nobody would come. And maybe it's too soon.
Put this on the agenda, this little pieces?
The agenda's already gone out.
So we'd have to have a special meeting.
Yeah.
And start it at 7:45. 7:30. We're going to be done by 7:30.
Actually, we have some quite significant issues for the elementary, the things from F&O that came through the ad hoc property committee about Lowell School and Cold Spring School, and we have the administrative facilities building or
Educational
whatever that's
services.
called. Oh, I used the wrong word.
No, that's okay.
What is that?
I thought we got that all in consent.
Somebody worked really hard to put everything on.
Okay, just a suggestion.
We actually have some significant items.
Okay.
So let's just finish up on this, Bob. We need to know about the supplemental question.
Well, one of the
for
suggestions I was
ad.
going to make on the supplemental question, and it is for the ad, is if you do another work session like this within the next month, let's say, I think it works out pretty well. What I would suggest to you, if the rest of the board would take this, is, I mean, the stuff that Tony and Jim did is just tremendous, and it gave me several ideas for supplemental questions. My thinking is that you take the list that I already gave you, which you could look at certainly, but I'd like to tailor that supplemental question or questions to what they've heard directly from administrators in the district. And I mean, the first one is a tremendous one. I could take a stab at drafting, maybe with Jim and Tony's assistance, and that sort of, we could put together a couple of proposed supplemental questions that the board could review at that next work session, and that'd be perfect timing for us if we could get agreement on those. If, we could come up with 2 supplemental questions and include them as part of the application, that'd be great.
We could do a conference call or something, or call each other.
And Bob, he'll come to Missoula.
Can I have?
Well, on that note,
If that works.
do we want to just look at our calendars while several of us are here and pick a date for another work session?
Well, we can't have it during MCEL.
No?
No.
And I believe we have an oddity this month. Do we have F&O in the 4th week and P&P in the 5th week?
Mm-hmm.
So we have F&O on the 23rd and P&P on the 31st. I don't know of any other meetings we have late in October. So this would have to be evening, so we probably would rather not do it right after everyone gets back from MCEL, and plus F&O is that week. So the week of Halloween, or do we want to go into the first week of November?
For the 29th.
What's wrong with next week?
We got Tuesday, we got board meeting
Yeah.
on Tuesday.
What do we have on the 30th?
31st.
The 31st, we have P&P
Yeah.
at noon.
I was saying the 29th, Monday the 29th. Good.
Did you say there was something on the 30th?
No.
Oh, good, okay, good.
Monday, the 29th, does that work for you, Bob? Or you don't have
I'm out of town.
you're at a disadvantage.
Oh, you're at attention?
Yeah, but
I'm actually in Great Falls that night.
Okay, that night's
Jim
not,
Saver's gone too.
that's not a good night. What about Thursday, November 1st? No.
day after Halloween.
Tuesday, the 30th?
Can't be here.
Okay. How about Monday, November 5th? Well, that's awfully close. That's just a week before we want the ad to run. Do you have a deadline for the copy of the ad?
No, we're fine, we can do that.
Monday, November 5th?
I can't be here.
No?
What about
Thursday,
back to the 6th?
25th.
I'm gone,
Scott's gone.
but that's okay,
I could also not do the 25th.
What about the
24th?
16th?
Yes, that would give us 2 nights in a row, though. I was trying to avoid 2-night meetings in a row.
The 16th?
Are you gone that day, Scott?
I'm gone the week of the 16th and the 22nd.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to Phoenix and Denver, so.
That's MCEL. I'd rather not do anything that week because so many trustees will be giving several days there.
So up to 9th, I'll see that, you already talked about it.
So we can't do a special meeting this evening, or we don't want to drive home later, or?
Well, right now, we're talking about a work
Oh,
session.
that's right.
So let's just keep working on a date. Let's see, the Okay, the last week of October, the 29th is out, the 30th is out? Good. Okay. The 31st
Is out.
is out. November 1st is out.
Oh, wait a minute. What time would we start?
6. We can't start before 6 because people at work can't get here earlier than that.
Okay. I could be here by 6:15.
6:15 on November 1st?
Let's see. I fly into Missoula Wednesday, November 7th. I'm going to be gone that long.
Should we send our problems to Trudy and let her assign one that will have the most people there?
Well, we might have to do that. Can we go one more week, though? Because we can go into November. The 5th is out, is that right? How about the 6th?
Well, Nancy and I both have an orchestra concert that night.
Okay, how about the 7th?
It's okay. You're back, Jim?
If it's in the evening, I'm back.
It's evening. Wednesday, November 7th, is that enough time to get copy for an ad, or is that too late?
We're okay.
We have a date.
It's a long time from now.
It is.
A whole month's gonna go.
It doesn't take long. The turnaround isn't much because we're electronic anymore. It's not like you have
Are you
to set the
available?
print or anything, so.
Are we making this a preliminary deal until we can talk to the other three or
Yes.
four that aren't here?
Yes. We will find out about attendance for that meeting. Okay, but tentatively would be Wednesday, November 7th at 6 PM in this room with another light supper.
Excellent light supper, Carol, thank you.
But we want a different one. Saved for 30 days. Judy's done that to us before.
Is there any other information?
Okay, thank you.
from us tonight before we
You want the
wrap up?
action on the timeline and on the,
Well, we were just talking about that ahead of time. I'm not sure that we necessarily need.
oh, okay.
Is there anything else?
And I don't think we need official action on the timeline. We have some, everything else that I think we need to go forward.
Questionnaire we don't need action on?
We have a general consensus that
We did have that,
we're
yeah.
going to have a questionnaire. We'll do public comment when we're done.
Well, you just said you had consensus on the questionnaire, and I had a request for a suggestion for the questionnaire.
Okay, we'll take, when we are finished with our work here, we'll take public comment. Is there anything else?
No, not that I can see.
We're going to hold the supplemental question for the next meeting. We can vote on that if we need to. We have March 3rd and 4th as the big dates that everybody needs to pencil in their calendars or ink in. Perhaps we can hold this other topic, number 7, for our next meeting, because of the lateness of the hour. Would that be all right?
Well, and by that time, I think we'll have some even mock-ups for you.
We might have something to look at, okay.
March dates are what?
3rd and 4th,
Okay.
and I think we have consensus to a degree, but we will talk about this more at the next meeting.
What?
Pardon?
We have consensus on what?
On most of the items here, on the process that we're going to use under number 2, on the timeline, that in general, we do want to use a questionnaire. I didn't hear any trustees talk about, do we need to talk about that one more for trustees? About different questions? We didn't do a vote on that. Do we need a vote on that?
On the questionnaire to parents?
On the questionnaire that is here in our packet.
I think we've discussed it pretty well.
I think it's important we have something similar to what we did before.
I think we'll-
Because then
we'll
we
have
can
something.
compare and see if anything has changed.
Okay.
I mean, you can tweak a little bit, but
That's a good point. And anything we didn't get
Can I make a
to
brief
tonight?
comment
Yes.
about what I call interviews of selected community members? I mean,
Yes.
and I would add my compliments to Jim and Tony for taking that on, and I guess I just would encourage other board members, if you think of community members that you really think need to be involved in the process. I mean, not necessarily if they would be willing to, but if you think that their voice should be heard. I have sort of a list of folks that I'm talking to. I think Carol's even given me another name to talk to, and I'm going to be doing some of that as well. We've sort of done that in lieu of, because you guys just got through with a strategic planning process, so we're not doing the type of community meetings to garner that response to the questionnaire. So this is a real important part to try to reach out to people and get their involvement in this thing. So if you have other people that you think Jim and Tony need to or should talk to, please, let them know, or let us know that you have a list of 20 people that we need to contact, and we'll figure out a way to do that.
Or if you'd like to be involved. I think for consistency, you could go with Jim and I'll step out, or when you're out of town, if somebody wants to come with me. Is that okay?
That's great.
Doesn't bother me anyway. We just asked those 3 questions about where do you think we should be going, what kind of leader?
Yeah, characteristics.
And the other one was,
Direction,
what are the
strengths,
strengths and what are the weaknesses?
Yeah.
And try not to do a critique of the present administration. Otherwise, you'll spend all of your time talking about things that you can't really change.
Okay, no one who wanted to go.
One other thing about next week's meeting in Sealy Lake, we have 3 trustees that are not going to be able to attend that meeting. It's very important for Joe and Scott and Kelly and I to be at that meeting, because that's the only way we'll have a quorum of the elementary board, and we have several elementary-only items. Were you about to say that you couldn't come? Okay.
I can't wait to go to see the I got an idea. Let's meet at different school districts or different buildings. Great idea.
Okay, Trudy would also like everyone to call her to let her know if we want to carpool. We'd be leaving at 3:30 next Tuesday for Sealy Lake for carpooling.
For a 6 o'clock meeting?
Or we just get supper?
No, actually, we meet with the...
Visit at 4:30 and a dinner at 5.
Yeah.
That's in there? I didn't read that.
It's in there, yeah.
They have a great dinner out there.
Is there anything else from our
Oh, yeah.
agendas? Anything that I've forgotten? I kind of feel like we've been all over the map, and I don't want to have overlooked something. Okay, we'll go to public comment.
Thank you. I wanted to say how much I think that you're doing a really excellent job with this process. With the exception of the salary range, but I really want to express appreciation to Tony and Jim. I'm sorry, it's late. Tony and Jim for their presentation and that material. I know it's been many hours since we discussed the questionnaire, but I would like to ask you to consider a couple of minor changes, because I agreed very strongly with what Nancy Picard said about some of the way that some of the responsibilities of the superintendent are described, and I'm in total agreement with Bob's element that it's an educational aspect. But I do think that a lot of the wording, not a lot, but some of the wording seems to come from descriptions of superintendent's jobs in smaller districts where the superintendent does have more hands-on some of the words that are described. So just to cut to the chase, I'd like to ask you to consider on the first question, where it says plan and manage the district's budget, that you might consider a little more descriptive of what the superintendent here actually does, which is prepare annual budget recommendations for board approval. Just like you to consider that. And then further down on the list, it says plan short and long-term district strategic direction. I think it might help, since we have already gone through the strategic planning process, to change the word plan to implement short and long-term district strategic direction, because that really is what the superintendent has to do at this stage, is implement what you guys have already lined out for it. So I hope you'll consider those two changes. And then on the second section, I don't know what to do about it, but I just really think question number 3, I want a superintendent who has experience in recruiting and retaining outstanding personnel. You know, out of all of those, I just feel like that's the farthest away from, I mean, we have Larry, and it just, I don't know, I would just drop that question, is my suggestion. On the timeline, I just had one minor suggestion to ask. I remember how exciting the process was in hiring Dr. Clark, and the interviews, the reception, it was really a good process. And the one piece, number 3 on the timeline, when you get down to interviews on March 3rd and 4th, and then it jumps to announcement of selection March 11th. What I do remember everybody would probably have to be hopefully not prepared to stay up till midnight, because I remember people made the decision at about midnight. It was very exciting though, really. But there was this sort of gray area in between after the interviews, when lots of people had opinions, and when you made the decision. And so my question is, what's a better way for the people to express their public comment before you make the decision? I don't know whether it's going, would be another work session where you took public comment, but it sort of seemed like all that happened back then was nobody knew where to direct it at that point, because there was no intermediate way for the public to express their opinions after hearing the interviews in a formal way. And I would feel, personally, I would feel better. I know, I really trust Bob. Oh, I think it's wonderful that the district is hiring Bob to do this. I would personally feel better to spend a couple $100 in advertising Education Week. And the last thing I just want to say is regarding the decision on the salary range. I hope that it bears out the quality that the district will be paying then in salary and benefits. And I guess I'd have to say that, because otherwise I think you guys will pay for it, because people may feel like you've gone too far with this. Hopefully it will go the other way. We'll get a fabulous superintendent that will justify all of the expense. I myself feel much more conservative that I don't believe in the system that provides a salary of, now $150,000 with benefits for superintendents that stay an average of 3.8 years. And while this article was given, I would just like to emphasize for the point down right before the bottom of the first page, the quote in this article which says, districts need to develop leadership within. You need to bring the best teachers along. Too many districts look for an administrator